Someone here today?
She won't be here this year.
Okay.
Yeah. She's got too much election stuff to do. Oh, I didn't think about that. We need Stephen to do that.
Are you going to be showing our items as they come up? Or not? I mean, I have it on a pad.
Not expecting Kathy.
No.
Let's be our group. Good evening, everyone. It is 6:01 p.m., so we will call the April 2nd regular meeting of the Meridian Township Board to order. Some of you may be looking at me and thinking, hey, that's not Pat Jackson, our supervisor. I am not. I am Supervisor Pro Tem Scott Hendrickson. Supervisor Jackson is unable to make it this evening, so I will do my best to run the meeting as smoothly and efficiently as she does. With that said, we'll move on first to the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would please join me.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Item number 3 on our agenda is roll call. The clerk will call the roll, please.
Supervisor Jackson. Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson.
Here.
Clerk Guthrie is here. Treasurer DeShane.
Here.
Trustee Sumlin. Trustee Trezise.
Here.
Trustee Wilson.
Here.
5 board members are present, 2 are absent, and the absent board members are Sumlin and Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next on our agenda is item 4A, a presentation. We have new police officer introductions, and we'll bring up Chief Grillo.
Good evening, everyone. Come to you again today with a smile on my face as I am here to present officers number 34 and 35 to our ranks today. And even better news than that, I will be up here again several times over the next few months as we have more onboarding to do. But today is about Kevin and Jacob. So I'll introduce Kevin Schultz to us first. Kevin comes to us, he's a Central Michigan grad. He contacted us recently, and he was mutual friends with a member of Rotary who actually contacted us and said this guy would be an outstanding officer for you. He'd already applied, so we were excited to have him, meet with me. A very impressive man. Actually spent several years in the oil industry before moving on to criminal justice. He was sponsored through the Washtenaw Community College Police Academy that recently graduated, and he was the M. Coles Award winner, which is the highest award that you can get in the police academy, and he was also the academic award winner as well for his academics. The next officer is Officer Jacob Scarvey. Jacob is actually familiar to a lot of us because he was a cadet for Meridian Township back in 2018. He attended Michigan State University, came and worked for us as a cadet, did a fantastic job. He graduated from Michigan State University with a bachelor's degree, also studied abroad for a semester in Italy. Moved home to Connecticut, which is where his hometown is, his home state is, and he's back now, and he applied with us to go through the police academy at Washtenaw as well. He also did very well in the police academy, graduated with the Physical Fitness Award, right?
Yes, sir.
So we have many award winners here with us, and there really aren't that many awards that they hand out at the police academy. So it's very impressive that do you have 35 graduate?
31.
31 graduate, that 3 of the awards went to our candidates. In fact, the director of the academy told me that they were very impressive, very respectful. She said, I think her words were, if I had a class full of Kevins and Jacobs, I wouldn't retire. So she's fantastic. This is Kevin. I'll give him an opportunity to, address you.
Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you for all the support since I've been here, and thank you for sponsoring me through Washtenaw. That was really appreciative, and that was great. It's just an honor to be here and to serve this community, and I can't wait to get out there and serve the community. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I found a home in Meridian Township back when I was a cadet in 2018. I fell in love with the community, fell in love with the officers here. I'm just very thrilled to work here and continue to get to know this community. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Without your help, I wouldn't be here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Kevin. Glad to have you on board.
Welcome.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Welcome again. Glad to have you here.
Welcome back. Congratulations.
Nice to see you again since yesterday. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you very much, Chief Grillo. Next on our agenda is item 5, citizen address agenda items and non-agenda items. There'll be several opportunities to speak at public comment this evening. And if you would like to speak before the board, this would be a good time to do that. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we will ask you to please give us a green card with your name and address if you wish to address the board. With that being said, public comment is open at 6:06 p.m. Anyone from the public wishing to speak this evening? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed at 6:07 p.m. We'll move on to item number 6 on our agenda, Township Manager Report. And we'll turn things over to Manager Frank Walsh.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem, and good evening, Board. A few items to bring for you this evening. First of all, I want to acknowledge 3 of our team members who are celebrating anniversaries this week. Leroy Harvey, our Environmental Program Coordinator. He joined us on April 1st of 2010, so 14 years for Leroy. Michelle Prince, our Executive Assistant, joined us on April 7th of 2016, so her 8 years of service with us. And Gavin Ullman, one of our paramedics, he joined us 3 years ago on April 1st. One of the goals of the board that's been clearly stated is to deal with the current condition of the Four Corners. With the Village of Okemos project, we hope will someday come to fruition. And I think you'll be seeing something about that here very shortly. We're working with, the request has been by the board to green up the area. And so before we do that, though, we need to meet with Eagle and make sure what we can and can't do because of the work that's been done with the hazardous cleanup thus far. So that meeting is scheduled for this week, and we'll be meeting with Eagle to determine what we can do. We've talked to the developers, and they're willing to share in the cost of greening up that corner. So you'll hear more about that. I'll be attending with a couple members of the police department, the Women in Police event Thursday night at the Kellogg Center. This is about the 30 by 30 campaign, 30% of the officers. This is something that former Chief Plaga got us involved in and will continue under Chief Grillo. I've met some of the upcoming candidates that Chief Grillo has in mind and certainly committed to diversity and more women in the department. But I'll look forward to that event Thursday night. We have one position unfilled. That was the project engineer. That was Niall Nunn's position upstairs. Not only a tough position to fill, but Niall is such a great member of our organization. But we think Dan and Giannis and his team have found a really great candidate, and she has accepted our offer. And so we expect her in the coming weeks. You'll meet her. Nokomis, the Cultural Center, has some plans for the future. It is one of the sites, of all the sites that was considered when we looked at the senior center, but quickly set aside because in talking to Nokomis, they have plans for the future of that site. And we were glad to hear that. We all reached out to them, and John Ostrander, who kind of heads it up, would like to sit down with the township and talk to us about their plans for the future. And we were planning to do that this week. There's a critical incident training for police, fire, and elected officials. It's on April 17th, and it's at the Crown Plaza in Lansing. I know Chief Grillo and Chief Hamill plan to attend that, and I plan to attend also. There is an opening for a board member. Supervisor Jackson is not able to attend that. So there's an opening for one board member to attend that on April 17th. Please see me if you have an interest in attending that. The Hazlet Village Square will be coming back to the township. I'll make it brief, but there's a new legislation, new law passed that allows housing to be included in a TIF, which really changes the organizational makeup of a TIF. And that's a quick summary of it. The Hazlet Village Square is going to be coming back to the township, asking us to relook at the brownfield that was approved for that development, and we'll be meeting with them in the next 2 weeks. The CIA, the Corridor Improvement Authority, and the TIF, that continues to move forward. Director Clark is working on that, and that involves getting Lansing Community College and CATA and Ingham County all on board with the TIF, and that's going extremely well. You'll hear more about that. I want to thank the Board of Review who's met, and our assessing team. That's all behind us now. That took place in the last couple of weeks. And finally, it's come to our attention through Trustee Wilson, through some of the contacts that she has, and through Deputy Manager Opsimer about this senior elder funding through the county, and how they might be funding some costs for senior centers in Williamston and Stockbridge. And so today we sent a letter, or an email, I think maybe you may have seen it. We sent a letter to county officials, the county administration, about we would like to get in on this process as well. We got a nice response back from the county already. And so we'll be working together as a team about how we approach that pot of funding for the future for our community and senior center. There's a lot more to say about the community senior center, but I think Chair Wilson will probably address that tonight. That's all I have this evening, unless there are any questions.
Board members, any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is item 7 on our agenda, board member reports of activities and announcements. Any board members wishing to give a summary of activities and announcements? Treasurer DeShane.
Thank you, Supervisor Protem. On March 20th, we did our electronic wire transfers to our 2 big bonds we've issued. In 2013, we issued the Central Fire Station bonds, and as the manager has mentioned in the past, we are going to be able to pay that off early, although this year was a full payment. Also, the local road program, which is those bonds were first issued in 2010. We made that annual payment as well. That program will end in around 2019, and the bonds will be paid off the same year. CATA board meeting met on March 20th. This is the first full year of CATA providing holiday bus service on Easter, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day. And we've had dozens and dozens of members of our community who participate in that. It's not like the typical line service, but you call ahead of time, make a reservation, and you get door-to-door service with that. It's an exciting new service being offered by CATA at no additional charge to their communities that fund CATA. And then last Tuesday, all of us were here for the annual boards and commissions meeting. I was very impressed by the work being done by our 20 boards and commissions. Literally hundreds of volunteers make those work, and this board couldn't function without the foundational work they do at the grassroots level on all these important issues. So it was really refreshing to see that, and I was charged up by it, but also reminded that we still have well over a dozen vacancies on our boards and commissions. We need more members for that, so we'll have to continue to ask our friends and neighbors to come out and join. We heard no one say, oh, I wish I hadn't done this, or this is the most boring thing ever. Instead, they say, yeah, I'm impressed by all I've learned about the township and about my local government. It's a great way to get involved in the township. Most of us got started first by being on a local board or commission. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson. I want to report that we had a task force meeting for the community and senior center this afternoon. We are in the process of assessing the structural issues at the building that we may potentially use for this purpose. And so we've engaged structural engineers to start that work in the next 2 weeks and report back to us. We also were in discussions about county millages because there may be potential, as Manager Walsh referred to, there may be some potential for millage dollars from the replacement senior millage. And it's going to be crafted so that we could potentially benefit from that. So it was a good meeting. We also went over numbers for what the budget would be and where we might find all the funding. In addition, Trustee Trezise and I went last night to Solarize Meridian, which was fascinating because there's so many residences that are taking advantage of putting solar on the roof, and it has a very short return on investment. So we heard all about that, and we're happy to share or get you in touch with those folks if you're interested in it. And the third thing I did in the last couple of weeks was really a pleasurable event. The Southern Indian community in this area had their New Year's celebration of the Telugu people. And I was invited to come, and I was brought up on the stage, and there were 1,000 people there. And what it really reinforced is the richness of our cultural diversity in this community. So I am very grateful to have gone to that event, and encourage you, if you are welcome to an event like that, don't turn down the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. Anyone else? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson. It's gonna be a mouthful all night. April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and Children's Small Talk Advocacy Center will be here tomorrow to put up pinwheels on display at the corner of Central Park Drive and Marsh Road. I will be joining them. I join them every year. It's something that's dear to my heart to support child abuse and sexual abuse prevention. So that will be happening. I attended a Vietnamese cultural event through Michigan State University. It was fascinating. I wasn't invited, but I saw that it was happening, and bought a ticket and went to the event by myself. And I had a really good time. I had an enjoyable time. There was fantastic food, and it was just really nice to get out and be part of something. I don't feel like I've been part of a cultural event for a while, so it was really nice to participate in something like that. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Clerk Guthrie. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 8, which is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Treasurer DeShane, supported by Trustee Wilson. Any additions or changes to the agenda? Seeing none. All those in favor of the agenda say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the agenda passes. Next up on our agenda is item 9, the consent agenda. On tonight's consent agenda, we have several communications with the board. We have 3 sets of minutes from special, regular, and joint meetings that this board has held. We have the manager's bills, disposal of equipment, an amendment to our public participation plan, and to reschedule a public hearing for May 9th on the recreational marijuana license applications in Zone 3. We have a motion for the consent agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Trustee Wilson. Do we have a support?
Support.
Supported by Trustee Trezise. Any changes or updates to this? Seeing none, we'll need a roll call vote.
Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson.
Yes.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Trezise.
Yes.
And Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much. For item 10 on the agenda is questions for the attorney. We have no questions. Item number 11A are our public hearings. So our first hearing this evening is 2022 order to maintain sidewalk resolution number 4 public hearing. We'll go ahead and open the public hearing at 6:19 p.m. And I believe we'll have an introduction by Deputy Manager Opsimer.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson and board members. So briefly, I would just remind you, we are on the second of 2 public hearings as part of the Public Act 188 process. So this is the second draft of the assessment roll. So this is the opportunity for residents to provide comments for or against the assessment roll. Typically, those would be in the way of measuring your sidewalk repairs and determining whether or not the measurements that the township has provided is accurate. And with that, I'll leave you to your public hearing.
Thank you, Deputy Manager Opsimer. Any members of the public wishing to come forward at this time? Okay. Seeing none, I believe Clerk Guthrie has something to add into the record for this section.
I would like to request that a letter to the board be entered into the record for this public hearing from Linda and Peter Carrington. They dropped off the letter prior to the meeting and requested that it be added as part of the public hearing.
Okay, without objection, so moved. All right, and with that, with no other public wishing to speak at this time, we'll close the public hearing at 6:20 p.m. Next up on our agenda is agenda item 11B, recreational marijuana license applications in zones 1, 4, and 5. Just for the sake of keeping us orderly, I'm going to suggest that we take these one at a time and handle each zone independently. And then for each of these hearings, we'll have a brief staff overview. The applicant will be given an opportunity to speak, please, for a maximum of 5 to 10 minutes, and then public will be able to comment afterward. With that, we'll open the public hearing for recreational marijuana license application in Zone 1 and turn things over to Director Schmidt.
Thank you very much. So just, excuse me, just by way of background, this is the current state of play that the Township Board adopted for recreational marijuana licensing when they redid the ordinances last year. We went from 7 to 5 districts. These are the 5 districts. Just to briefly go through them, District 1 is Hazlitt and Okemos Road, the southeast corner only. District 2 is the south side of Grand River from the CSX Railroad tracks at Park Lake to almost the East Lansing border. District 3 is the area, the northeast quadrant of Marsh and Grand River, roughly to Central Park, although it bounces around a little bit. District 4 are the 5 properties south of the railroad tracks on the east side of Hagedorn Road, south of Mount Hope. And District 5 are the east and west sides of Okemos Road at Jolly. And so that's the current state of play. And so what you have in front of you this evening are public hearings for 1, 4, and 5. So the board established a zoning set of criteria, a non-zoning set of criteria, and eventually a review set of criteria to review these applications. The application window was opened in January. We received a total of 5 applications. 3 of them are in front of you this evening because they were individual applications within their district, which means that technically they did not have to go through the competitive review process. I can tell you that the review subcommittee, which consisted of myself, Director Clark, and Assistant Planner Chapman, at the direction of Manager Walsh, reviewed them all against the criteria to give a thorough analysis. We held 2 meetings as required by the ordinance, one of them which was a public hearing, open to the public. We did not receive any public for these 3 applications. At the public hearing, we did, so starting with District 1. District 1 is the location, is the same applicant that was previously approved for a medical marijuana. They do business as Herbana. They had a complete application as determined by the committee, and the competitive review committee noticed no major problems with their application. They are fairly far along in the application process in that they actually pulled building permits after receiving special use permit approval in 2020 and started construction, although they were not able to complete construction due to the COVID pandemic. They have subsequently started work on opening those permits to be able to get towards occupancy with an eye towards ultimately opening recreational in this location. And so that's Zone 1. I'm happy to get into more detail now or during the discussion, but generally we found that this was a complete application, raised no major concerns with respect to the applicant. I can tell you, I would also add one thing that we did ask all of the applicants after the public hearing at the review committee for additional information with respect to any violations. So our ordinance does not require that, nor does our competitive review criteria. It takes into account whether or not there was a revocation or a suspension of a license. We went down to the granular level and asked for the detail on violations, and what I can tell you is that in my research, I've been unable to find any applicant anywhere that doesn't have at least one violation, because the metric system, which is the tracking system, appears to be a little complicated, and there are a lot of little technical metric violations. The other thing that I found throughout this is that the state appears to err on the side of violation and then withdraw them if there is a reason why maybe it shouldn't be in the case. And so for this applicant, they had one violation each on the retail side and the processor side. The processing side was, and you'll hear this again later, a technical video failure. Apparently the power backup on their video system did not automatically restart video recording when the power came back on. So they lost power thinking that it was going to come back on, as did another applicant. It did not, so that was a violation on the processing side. On the retail side, they had some packaging issues and 1 gram of waste that appeared to be on the ground outside the trash can, and that was a violation. I can tell you that they have multiple locations and only had violations at the Lansing store and the processor in Ann Arbor. Their other retail outlets appear to be very well run. And so that's all I have for District 1, and I'll open it up to the public at this point.
Thank you, Director Schmidt. Is there a representative from the applicant here this evening for Zone 1? Okay. Seeing none, any members of the public wishing to approach and discuss this item? Okay, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing for Zone 1 at 6:26 PM and open the public hearing for Zone 4 at 6:26 PM and hand things back to Director Schmidt.
Thank you. So Zone 4, also one of our medical applicants. This was, it's a slightly different group than the previous applicant, but still Mr. Pernick and Mr. Valdori are the key players in this case. This is actually different than their medical application. So you may recall that they were previously approved and their special use permit application was for construction of a new building. They have actually changed tack, and they will be reusing the existing structure on the site, converting it to a commercial structure, adding a parking lot for the facility. They do meet the application requirements. We did, I believe, have a minor deficiency on this one that was corrected from an application perspective. And I want to make a distinction here. They met the standards of the application. However, we did raise some concerns with them during the competitive review that we did to try and prep them essentially for the public hearing. And they did respond with a substantial amount of additional information that we did provide to the board. As we've talked about with all the applicants, and as Attorney Kushel and I have spoken about, and Township Attorney Kushel and I have spoken about, board's under no obligation to take into account that additional information, but it is good information. They did respond effectively to the concerns that we have, which were notably additional information on their security plan and additional information on their financing were the 2 big ones. Also had a couple of violations to note. Their violations largely appear to be a difference between medical and recreational. And under medical, persons under 21 can be employed, but under recreational, they cannot. So that was a violation. They had an issue with some levels of concentrate that failed under recreational. They also had a video power issue, and they also had a metric issue. So a lot of the same things. What I will say at this point, and what I'll say about all these applications is that we get copies of the state violations that come out on a weekly basis. And we see where they've revoked licenses and put people on essentially the do not fly list. I'm blanking on the banned list. Generally what happens is you get a citation and a fine. None of the fines that any of the applicants got, and there are only a few fines that actually got to that point, because many of them were withdrawn. None of the fines rose to the level that we're seeing in serious fines, because we're seeing tens and 20s and 50s of thousands of dollars. These are 2s and 3s and 5s. So relatively smaller violations in the grand scheme of things. Again, at this point, I'll probably turn it over to the public and the applicant and let them speak
Thank you, Director Schmidt. Is there a representative from the applicant who wishes to speak at this time? Please approach the podium and give us your name, if you would, and an address.
My name is Sam Pernick with Okemos Local Investments. Thank you, Director Schmidt. Happy to answer any questions that folks.
Can I get your address for the record, please?
My address is, I live in Royal Oak, 2515 West 13 Mile Road, Royal Oak, Michigan 48073.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the board's time and consideration. I manage a store in Belleville currently called Blue Sky Cannabis Co. We've been open for over a year, and we're very excited at the opportunity to develop another business at the Hagedorn location. We're very excited about it, working with Marcus. I did want to note that our store, Blue Sky in Belleville, has not had any fines in the over a year plus that we have been open. And we are we will be managing the store on Hagedorn Road. So because Marcus is a member of a facility in Jackson, which I believe you're a passive member, also not the manager there, the fines that the Jackson facility had were included as part of our application because he's an owner of this entity. But as the manager of the Hagedorn location, we have not had any fines in Belleville. And I'm not sure we've had any official quote-unquote complaints. I think we've gotten a few, I think they're called notice of violations, where they basically just send you a warning. I think we've gotten a few of those. Maybe the director could correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my understanding. So I did just want to clarify that. As an operator, we have a no fine record, which we're very proud of. So I did want to make sure that that was clear. And there are, as the director mentioned, there are these bulletins that come out where they say, oh, so-and-so, you know, they messed up this, they messed up that, and this is what they were fined. And we've never been on that list, and we plan to not be on that list. We work very, very hard to make sure that we're complying with all the rules and requirements. And it's a lot of work to do that. Because it's a highly regulated industry, especially dealing with the metric system, which is our seed to sale system, where you have to track every purchase. And we've implemented a lot of training for our staff to make sure that the staff knows all the rules. And so anyway, I did just want to mention that. We're very proud of that record and happy to answer any questions. We really appreciate the board's consideration. So.
Thank you very much. The board may have questions, but we'll probably address that in the discussion item later.
All right.
Any members of the public wishing to speak about the application for Zone 4? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing for Zone 4 at 6:33 p.m. and open the public hearing for Zone 5 at 6:33 p.m. Director Schmidt.
Thank you, Mayor, Supervisor Pro Tem. Mr. Pernick got me into a thought that I wanted to follow up on before I get into this, but one of the things that staff very quickly discovered in reviewing these applications, especially as we got into the complaint violation issue, is that none of the applicants technically have a violation because they're all new LLCs. And that is what we found is sort of the nature of the industry is each location is sort of a standalone silo with separate ownership documents and separate everything. And so that's why we reached out to all of the applicants and we asked them for anything related to any business that any of the owners have a stake in. And so that's why we've gotten into, as Mr. Pernick pointed out, with Mr. Valdori's facility in Jackson that he's a passive owner of, that was disclosed. There's one of the other applicants, we had a very lengthy back and forth with them about what % of ownership is enough for me to disclose it. And we left it at just disclose it and tell us that you're not an active member. because as I understand it, sometimes in these industries, there's trading of services for percentage of ownership. And so technically, none of the applicants have any violation history. But once we drill down, that's the information you're getting. And so I just want to make that clear for the record. And sorry for that tangent. District 5 is the last of the districts this evening under public hearing. This is one of our original medical applicants. And this is also, frankly, the applicant that was most persistent and stayed on top of things the best during the pandemic. They also, much like District Zone 1, they did, sounds really Hunger Gamey. They started construction prior to COVID and had to stop. They ultimately picked it back up last year and got to occupancy earlier this year. We have issued occupancy for the facility. They have some minor issues to resolve before full occupancy, but they are actually in the process with the state of Michigan at this point of getting their medical license issued to be able to open for medical. So this is the request for recreational. Candidly, they probably had the most complete application, the most detailed application, which is what I would expect from these guys. They've done a really good job over the years. Despite us not always agreeing on the interpretation, they've followed through effectively in anything we've asked them to do. They had a couple of minor issues, some standard operating procedures that were changed as a result of metric, and some tagging issues. They did have one facility, and to be clear on this one, they don't actually own any of the facilities anymore that had violations. They have sold them to other operators. Whether it was as a result of the violation or not hasn't been disclosed, but because one of their issues was with respect to some environmental related things that they have been resolved, and they no longer operate that facility. And so in the competitive review of this, I believe the committee, if I recall correctly, thought this was probably the best of the applicants. Although we weren't comparing them because we shouldn't be comparing them across zones, this was probably our best applicant. To the point where they've already provided us with plans to upgrade the facade of the building as well as they begin to move into this next phase. And so that's all I have at this time. I'll open it up to the public and step aside.
Thank you very much, Director Schmidt. Is there a representative from the applicant here who wishes to speak before the board this evening? Could I have you please come up and give us your name and address for the record?
Good evening to the board. Jamie Garmo. My address is 400. Oh, I just moved and it's escaping me. South Old Woodward, Birmingham. I have nothing in particular to say other than I've had the pleasure of presenting to this board for over the past few years for quite a few times with regard to medical and during the process in which the recreational ordinance was being drafted. Thank you, Tim, for the comments on the application. It's important for us to be very detail-oriented, especially with the township's involvement in terms of wanting to really get into the nitty-gritty of the ordinance and not just passing something and issuing licenses. With regard to those violations, they were cleared and, in full. The sale of the businesses has nothing to do with the violations. They were just, honestly, for lack of a better word, petty little things that the Cannabis Regulatory Agency has to issue. But in particular, the environmental one was remediated. We engaged a environmental consulting company that took care of whatever was done, and it was all cleared. So I open this to the forum for any questions, but that's all I have.
Thank you. The board may have questions for you at our discussion item later this evening, so if you'd
Okay.
stick around, please.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, and with regard to our medical license being issued, we are just finalizing the millwork, the cabinetry for the design of our operation. We went through some design changes, hence the temporary certificate of occupancy, and the Bureau of Fire Services, which has to approve your license before the CRA issues the license, has given us a pending approval until the millwork is completed. So once the design is finished, we plan on getting a reinspection from the state in order to have the medical license issued on the facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members of the public wishing to speak on Zone 5? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 6:39 PM, and that ends agenda item 11B. Next on our agenda is agenda item 12A, the Unruh Drain conversion from Chapter 20 to Chapter 3-4. And for this, we'll bring up Deputy Manager Opsimer.
Good evening again, Supervisor Pro Tem and board members. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate that. So this will be one of 7 Chapter 20 drain conversions that we will undertake. And as the board is aware from all the discussions regarding the Daniels drain, Chapter 20 drains was a chapter of the drain code that was established for the purposes of helping townships install drain infrastructure to attract development. That era in this township has long since passed, so it's overdue that we convert these drains. This is going to be the first of the drains that we convert due to the fact that the drain office would like to perform some maintenance on this drain later this year. And so this is going to be a 2-step process. My cover memorandum this evening does not speak to the second process, but we will have one additional resolution at your April 16th meeting. And then this resolution is also accompanied by the emergency maintenance agreement, which we negotiated with the drain office, and our attorneys have reviewed and signed off on. One outstanding matter that the township will have to resolve as part of this process are the past assessments that are owed and, well, the previous costs that have been incurred by the Unruh drain and have not been assessed. So the most recent assessment roll was 2018, which came to a total of $24,814.16, of which we will pay our historical percentage of 78.99%. So we will owe $19,671 for the unassessed costs for the drain. But the important part of this work is that we will not be on the hook for nearly 80% of the upcoming maintenance work. And the bonds that will be sold could be anywhere from $225,000 to $400,000 for the upcoming maintenance work that the drain office would like to perform. So with that, this is the very first step, and then we will have another resolution before you at your April 16th meeting. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Deputy Manager Opsimer. Treasurer DeShane.
I get Chapter 20 drains. Explain to me how a Chapter 3-4 drain is different.
So good examples would be the Namoka drain would be the most recent project on Shaw, Potter, in that neighborhood, kind of behind the Bluegill and the Mayfair. So with a drain like that, we would receive an at-large assessment based on our benefit, which at-large assessments for Chapter 3-4 are going to vary anywhere from about 12%, and it could reach as high as about 48%. In the instance of 48%, that was the 2 drains up in the Tower Gardens neighborhood, where the township paid a significant chunk of that assessment for an at-large. One of the reasons why we paid a much larger at-large assessment than usual in that instance was that project also addressed a lot of illicit connections to the sanitary sewer. We had a lot of sump pumps for those homes that were connected to our sanitary sewer, and we were able to connect those to the storm drain and get that flow out of our sanitary sewer system and into the appropriate infrastructure. So that's why we paid a higher assessment in that instance. Typically, our assessment would be in the 12 to 30% range, which would be commensurate with the benefit that we derive.
So 12 to 30%.
Yep.
Compared to 80% now.
Yes,
We're
correct.
passing much of this 80% on to the residents benefiting from this drain. Is that correct?
Perhaps at the time of the last petition project, that could be true. It's voluntary for the township under Chapter 20. So in the case of like the Daniels drain, we did pass that cost on because we already had established development around the drain, right? So it makes sense. We're not receiving a benefit because we're not driving new construction and new development. We're just maintaining the assets and making sure that the drain functions as it should have long ago.
So is the larger responsibility then being passed to the drain commissioner from this point on with this drain?
Yes, so with this conversion, the drain office would be responsible for doing the full assessment roll. So we would not have an instance like the Daniels Drain where the township was legally responsible for doing the assessments.
It's huge.
We would just get our at-large assessment. Whereas with the Daniels, to your point, Treasurer DeShane, we had to do the assessment roll. Then we have to administer the assessment roll, right? My office sends you the roll each year, and then you issue the assessments, and then we're collecting, and then we pay the full balance of the entire project. So we're paying the entire balance minus MDOT and the Ingham County Road Department's share. So this, we will just get our at-large assessment for the drain, and that's it. We will pay our invoice, and that's kind of the normal course of business.
Well, I'm really excited about this. This is a good move of benefit for the township. Who petitioned for this? Did we or did the Drain Commission initiate it?
So they reached out to us because they were about to start maintenance work, and so we held a meeting with them and talked about the possibility of converting it prior to their work. I know they have talked about work on the Mud Lake outlet, so that might be the next one that we bring before you.
Okay, thank you.
Is this a time-sensitive request?
This is a time-sensitive request, and that's why I asked that it be on your agenda for action tonight. Because at the conclusion of your process, the township process will conclude in terms of the board's actions after April 16th, if both resolutions are adopted. But then there is a more lengthy process at the county level where the county, the UNRRA Drain Board and various county bodies will have to meet and take action as well to conclude the conversion.
Okay.
So
just a note for board members that we will likely need to suspend our rules to take action on this evening. Any other questions or comments? Trustee Wilson.
Thank you. Dan, are you in the process then of looking at all 7 drains, I believe, to convert them from 20 to 3/4? How do you say that?
yeah, 3/4, chapter 3/4 drain.
Will the Daniels drain be included in that, or is that going to remain at 20?
That will be included. It'll probably be the last one that we do, just because it's the least likely to be bonded for at this point.
Okay.
Although I do think the drain office exhausted most of their contingency funding during the Daniels drain work, so.
Okay. So there's not intent, this is what I heard, this is new to me. What I heard is that we would not do an assessment roll for these 3/4 drains?
Correct.
Okay.
The drain
Not be
office would have
passing.
to do that work.
Oh, the drain office would do that work, okay. They'd have to set the roll
Yep.
and have the public hearing and so on.
And what we, where it really boils down to the meat and potatoes, with the chapter 20s, the one nice thing from a township perspective, if it's a petition project, which would be a larger improvement project to the drain. So if we're talking about an improvement project to the drain, the township really has to initiate it. Hypothetically, MDOT or the road department could also petition that improvement. But in the case of the Daniels, and in the vast majority of cases, it's going to be the township that initiates that. So we passed, the township board many years ago in 2015, petition that Daniels drain work. So that's the one nice thing that we have with a chapter 20 is that ability to petition or not petition the project. Like, we can stop a petition project. This kind of gets to one of the gray area, or it's not a gray area, it's not really a loophole, but this is where there's one caveat from the township's interest. A maintenance project that's on the pricier side of things, like this one, we can't prevent a maintenance project from proceeding. The drain office has sole discretion, so they can do very expensive maintenance projects, and then we're on the hook for the very expensive maintenance projects. So that's kind of where it boils down to, yes, okay, we need to convert these.
Okay.
'Cause that's where
thank
we
you.
lose control.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson. Can you explain or do you have any idea what the maintenance project is that the county is looking to do with this drain?
Yes.
What the costs are?
Very good question, Clerk Guthrie, and I can send the board the actual plans that we have. But generally speaking, I'm just gonna pull up the area in question, and I'll kind of just try to outline it with my cursor on Google Maps. So this is the UNRRA Drain Detention Basin,
Okay.
and This bank, the northern and eastern banks have eroded. And so what the drain office wants to do, when the contractor for the developer to the north, for the Grand Reserve, does the site grading, they want to take some of the excess soils and use that here. So the drain office is trying to, rather than bidding the work out, they would like to hire the developer's contractor because they compared it to their engineering estimates. And there's some cost savings in terms of mobilization because the contractor won't have to mobilize and they won't have to truck in the soil material because they're going to use it from this site. So that will be used on the banks, and then they're going to do, obviously there's going to be some tree clearing to get the equipment to the banks. And then also they're going to install the outlet pipe. So the pipe that draws the detention pond down is located approximately right here. They're going to install a new outlet pipe to the manhole. The manhole's somewhere in this tree canopy about right here. And then today there's just this little Y off of it with a catch basin. And instead of having the Y or the little drain pipe that extends off that main drawdown pipe, instead of having it go southwest like this, they're going to install it and it's going to go kind of northeast. And that's because they're going to install a spillway here. Just in case the detention ever reaches its capacity, it will spill over the riprap and they'll have a culvert end. So it'll look like a driveway culvert essentially. And that will feed any overflow. So any overflow from that detention pond will then feed into that drawdown pipe, and then that water gets taken to the northeast. And you can actually look at Exhibit A here, and it shows you the flow of the drain overall. So that detention basin is right here, and so you can see the drain pipe that outlets water from the Grand River Avenue stretch, and it outlets water in. And then the drawdown pipe is right here. So that's what they're going to be working on, as well as the banks right here.
How does this affect the current residents in the area, if at all? Or, and you talked about erosion. Does it affect, has it affected any wetlands in that area?
No, it hasn't had any major impact. So, I mean, no one's suffering negative consequences. The drain office was on site meeting with the developer to the north, and the contractor had actually pointed out a few issues with the banks and with that outlet pipe, and that's what kind of sparked the drain office's interest in this project. But no one's suffering any negative consequences in terms of drainage today.
So where this water is going to flow doesn't affect them either, is what I hear you saying.
Correct.
Okay.
It could fail to a greater extent in the future, and then there could be impacts, but today there's no negative impact to any property owners that I'm aware of.
And then you mentioned something about bonds and selling bonds. Can you explain that?
So essentially, what the drain office will do when they do a large petition project, they'll usually bond for a little bit extra, and then they hold on to that. And so that's kind of a little cash balance that they can use for maintenance. So let's say they bond for a large, a $4 million large petition project. They might tack on $50,000, and then they'll spend that down over the course of 5 to 10 years on periodic maintenance. And so right now what they're doing is they're bonding for a small maintenance project and some contingency funding for that ongoing maintenance over the next decade because they've exhausted all the prior bonds.
Okay.
So that small contingency that they once had from the most recent time that they bonded has now been exhausted. And so they're looking to bond for the actual work that will be done to the drain, which it sounds like it's going to be in the $200,000 to $250,000 range. But then they'll bond for some extra for future maintenance.
So this unpaid balance of $19,000, does the board need to decide tonight as part of this action how that's paid?
So I will bring you, when Director Yanni brings you the Q2 budget amendments, I'll have a budget amendment in there for this. During the Q1 budget amendments, we just adjusted all the drain accounts down.
Okay.
just slightly, because we had just finished paying off the invoices for the year. And now we'll do a budget amendment to add a little bit extra to reconcile the unread drain. But regardless of your action tonight, we would owe that assessment. What we're trying to do tonight is prevent owing 78.99% of whatever they ultimately bond for, which could be anywhere from $225,000 to $400,000.
Treasurer DeShane.
And that might be a conservative estimate. Don't forget, they estimated the cost of the Daniels drain at $1.5 to $2 million. And they handed us a bill for $8 million.
No, 6.4.
Either way, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, it was
Still a lot.
3 or 4 times as much as it should be, said it was gonna be. So they're terribly unreliable in their estimates, and so we better be braced for another lowball number and then get slammed in the head. I mean, they really did that with the tower drain. I mean, the township board struggled with that for years, trying to pay that bill off because the drain commissioner was so far off in their estimates.
Yep.
Thank you, Treasurer DeShane. Anyone else? This feels pretty straightforward, really, for a very complex topic. Converting this drain is going to save us in the long term in terms of overall cost, from my view. And in addition, it will put the maintenance of the behind-the-scenes work where it should be with the drain office. You know, the Daniels drain process, I wasn't here for the beginning of it, but I was here for the end of it. And it was pulling teeth. And this room was more full of angry residents than I've ever seen. And we're certainly happy to have our residents come out and speak with us. But the truth of the matter is that this was a very well-managed assessment role, but it very easily could have become unmanageable. And the drain office does this every day across the entirety of Ingham County. That's where that work should be, in my opinion. So I'll be supportive of this and the ensuing Chapter 20s down the road. Treasurer DeShane.
I move to adopt the resolution approving relinquishment of the UNRWA drain and authorize the supervisor and clerk to sign an emergency maintenance agreement.
Treasurer DeShane, if you could, we do need to suspend our rules to take action first before we.
It's already on the action item.
Right, but this is the first time it's come before us. So I think by our bylaws, we do need to suspend the rules first, if that's all right.
I move we suspend our rules and take action on this resolution tonight.
Moved by Treasurer DeShane,
Support.
supported by Clerk Guthrie. Any discussion on the suspension of the rules? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you. I move again to adopt the resolution approving relinquishment of the UNRWA drain and authorize the supervisor and clerk to sign the emergency maintenance agreement.
Support.
Supported by Clerk Guthrie, moved by Treasurer DeShane. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. We'll go ahead and do a roll call vote, please.
Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Trezise.
Yes.
Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Senator Epstein. All right, we'll go on to agenda item 12B, which is the MSP Emergency Management and Homeland Security Division, Section 19 resolution. And I believe we have Chief Hamill from our fire department.
Supervisor Pro Tem and Board, thank you. So as you recall, back in August of '23, on the 24th, we had a pretty severe storm that came through the township and Ingham County and multiple other counties. We had a tornado on I-96. That's the Bermuda Triangle, by the way, where that section of 96 where we get accidents all year long. But in the township, we sustained 80-mile-an-hour plus winds, which created significant damage to some homes, as well as a lot of debris around. And so it was submitted to the federal government through MSP, Emergency Management and Homeland Security, working with Ingham County and other emergency management groups from throughout the counties. And the president declared a disaster for us and a kind of a partial declaration. Generally, with a declaration, you get public assistance and individual assistance. Individual assistance is for, public assistance is for residents. And so we had quite a significant amount of damage in the subdivision off of Hewlett. In fact, we had a house that was destroyed that was worth about $1 million roughly. The only thing they would get is if they were underinsured, and we didn't have any issues with that. Our damage assessment team did go out and do about 9 or 10 homes in that subdivision. That was really the worst damage. And we actually went and met with them about a month ago when FEMA came in and opened up disaster centers. And some of them did work on some dollar figures for them. Not sure where they're at. That's kind of their own personal thing. What they didn't approve was individual assistance, which is us. And vice versa, public assistance, which is us. And so that would have paid for debris cleanup. And so they denied that. So what happens is the state of Michigan has what they have as a Section 19 clause. And what that's for is if we have jurisdictions that have damage to buildings and or debris cleanup, they would open up this and do public hearings. And then we would have to apply and do a resolution, which you have in front of you. And so our finance director, Dante, and I went to a meeting about 3 weeks ago at MSP to the rollout. And so today, what we bring you is a resolution which is required to apply for our little over $30,000 worth of, $30,345 worth of debris cleanup. So once the resolution is approved, if you approve it, we also have a application which I think is approved or included in your packet, which kind of goes over the costs. And as soon as we get this resolution done, Dante and I will submit it to MSP and wait and hear however long it takes to see if we get any money. There's not a guarantee generally, and I will tell you that for future thoughts that we should definitely reach out to some of our legislators to make sure this Section 19 is funded. Sometimes it's underfunded. They say there's about $4 million in there currently, so we should be okay. The side of that we don't know of is the federal part of the declaration throughout the multiple counties. The state has to pay, it's either 20 or 25% of whatever they award. So that's going up pretty significant. And that's every time there's a declaration, and we've had a few in the last few years in the state of Michigan. So we're confident we'll get some, may not get all of it, but the caveat is we have to do this application and this resolution. Okay. So I ask you to look at the resolution and approve it so we can move forward.
Thank you, Chief Hamill. And this is again also here for the first time before us this evening. I'm assuming that the application is time sensitive and needs to be taken up soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Board members, any questions or comments? Clerk Guthrie.
I just have one question, Chief Hamill. If the board approves this tonight on this resolution where it says attest blank name of clerk, would I be signing that tomorrow? Is that me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Trustee Wilson.
Chief Hamill, we were able to provide our residents with storm debris cleanup. Is that part of this?
So this is debris cleanup. Deputy Manager Opsimer managed this, and he hired a few companies to go around and clean up a lot of debris we had in the community. So it's residential areas in our areas of our buildings and such.
And that's included in this
Yes.
cost? Great. I think that was a wonderful thing, that we were able to offer that to our citizens.
Yeah, there are two parts of this. The biggest part is the debris cleanup, and then there's a little bit of overtime they cover for the fire department for the night of and the next day.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think this is something that, as Trustee Wilson pointed out, we were happy to do for our residents. And the relatively small price tag for the total cost of it, even on its own, I think the Township Board voted to indicate that that's something that we were more than happy to provide. The ability to get reimbursed for it is wonderful, and certainly I think I'm supportive of going after that pot of money to be reimbursed for it. But I think that's something that we would have done whether that was possible or not. Especially now knowing that we didn't know it was possible until just. With that, since this is the first time before us, I'll go ahead and get us started I'll move to suspend our rules to take up agenda item 12B this evening.
Support.
Supported by trustee Wilson. Any discussion on the motion to suspend the rules? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. So now I'll need a motion for the main motion. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. I move to adopt the State Disaster Contingency Fund grant resolution for Meridian Township's application for disaster assistance.
Support.
Supported by trustee Trezise. Any discussion on this topic? Seeing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Thank you all.
Very much, Chief Hamilton. Thank you. Next up is agenda item 12C, ordinance 2024-03, Planning Commission membership introduction, and we've got Director Schmidt here before us.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. So the request in front of you this evening is to introduce text amendment 2024-03, an amendment to change the number of members of the Planning Commission from 9 to 7. The Township Board discussed this at their last meeting and asked that the Planning Commission weigh in. The Planning Commission weighed in at their last meeting, which was last Monday, and agreed. Agreed that it was a good time to make this change, agreed that at least one of the members had previously advocated for this change on the Township Board earlier in their career, and agreed that the board can function effectively with 7 members. And so would recommend approval of this change. And so what's in front of you this evening is the formal introduction of that. Should the board choose to approve this for introduction, staff will publish it as required and bring it back for formal adoption at the next meeting.
Thank you, Director Schmidt. Board members. Trustee Trezise.
I think this is probably long overdue, because 7 is a good number for that type of commission, and it fits at the table. So I would move to adopt the resolution approving for introduction text amendment number 2024-03 to amend the Code of Ordinances of the Fire Township of Meridian at section 2-287 to change the number of planning commission members from 9 to 7.
Moved by trustee Trezise.
Support.
Supported by trustee Wilson. Any discussion on this item? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson. So, Mr. Schmidt, I too agree that this is a good move for the township. In the bylaws, in section 5.7A, it says 6 members. It says adoption of master plan or any part thereof, including extensions, additions, revisions, or other amendments, all of which shall require the affirmative vote of at least 6 members. Does that change with a change in the number of the planning commissioners?
So the Planning Commission noted that as well, and as is staff's policy, we will undertake a review of the bylaws
Okay.
should this get approved. We've generally gone on a 2-year cycle of updating the bylaws, and so I believe we are due.
Because I also noticed in 8.1 and 8.2, it said 2/3 of the vote. Okay,
Some of that will change, some of it won't, though. Some of that still, it's 2/3 of a vote for certain things. So we will go through a formal bylaw update with the Planning Commission after this is adopted.
okay. And then section 2.1, it talks about the term being 1 year. But then I thought I read in your memo, it says 3-year terms. Am I incorrect, or is it?
Give me just a second to get to the
Okay.
right spot here. That is not a question I had anticipated.
But
Bylaws.
I think the bylaw says 1 year and the code says 3.
What section are you looking at? I'm sorry.
Section 2.1 of the bylaws.
So 2.1 talks about the terms of officers, not the terms of.
That's what I was wondering. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to make a comment to the board that my hope is that we do have a good cross-section of representation of planning commissioners serving on the planning commission. I was a bit concerned at our joint board and commission meeting when I heard a representative from the planning commission state that they wanted to know where all of the undeveloped properties were. And my hope is that we would have a meeting with the Planning Commission and the Township Board just to meet to discuss the Township Board policies and to see that we are aligned and that we do have a good representation of planning commissioners on the Planning Commission.
Thank you. Any other board members wishing to comment? Treasurer DeShane.
I do think this is an excellent idea, and I intend to support this change in the amendment in the ordinance.
Thank you. For my part, I agree. I did have an opportunity at the Boards and Commissions meeting after that meeting broke to speak to the chair and the vice chair of the Planning Commission on this topic. They did reiterate their support for making this change, not just because of the table. Obviously, that's not the, the only reason why we would do it. But 9 is a large body, and that's a lot of people to weigh in on discussion. And speaking as someone who was on that planning commission for a number of years, their meetings are probably the only meetings in the township that run longer than ours. And, you know, it's not a bad thing, but you get to a certain point in a discussion where you get 6 people saying the same thing in a different way. I think that it's never a good time to pull back unless you've got vacancies. The Planning Commission does have a couple of vacancies at the moment, and so this change won't impact their membership at all. So I'll be supportive of this change. And the other discussion? Seeing none, this is an amendment to the ordinance, so we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Treasurer DeShane.
Yes.
Trustee Trezise.
Yes.
Trustee Wilson.
Yes.
Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson.
Yes.
And Clerk Guthrie votes yes. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much. Okay, next up on our agenda is item 13A, the recreational marijuana license applications in zones 1, 4, and 5. I think, again, just for the clarity of the process, we'll again separate these into each individual zone and take them one at a time. The time for public comment was in the public hearing. So at this point, we will go ahead and hear from staff if there's anything they have to add after the hearing. And then we'll open it up for board discussion. So first up, we have agenda item 13A1, which is Zone 1 Hazlitt Gallery. Director Schmidt, do you have anything that you'd like to add at this time?
Excuse me, just a second, I'll get back to the right tab. I have a lot of things open right now. No, this zone 1 is Hazlitt Gallery, Hazlitt and Okemos Road. I have roughly discussed this previously during the public hearing, and the separate memos that we did on each of these outlines the specific notes that we had as it relates to the specific criteria outlined in the review procedures for accepting competitive review and the competitive review process under Chapter 40, authorizing adult medical use establishments. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time, knowing that we have 3 of these tonight and 2 of these coming. I would just like to understand how the board would want to handle this discussion in general.
Okay, thank you, Director Schmidt. Board members, this is the first of these that we've taken up since the passage of the ordinance. We'll go ahead and open things up for a discussion on the cover memo and the applications that we received from this. And then I suppose we'll bring it back at a future meeting for final action. Any discussion on applications, on the application for Zone 1? Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. Tim, when I took a look at this packet, including the violations, I thought that some of these violations were significant, but would you enlighten us about the nature of this industry and where violations come from and the seriousness of the issue and when fines are imposed?
Yep.
Thank you.
So I will say a couple of thoughts. Obviously, all violations are technically not right. You did something wrong. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in this position, and we run into this on a local level with code enforcement all the time. What I will say in my review of
having been looking at this industry for well over a decade now and in some depth over the last 3 years, the state really swings a heavy hammer in this, and especially since the new director has come in. They have very much they appear to have increased their compliance staff and activity substantially. And so, as I mentioned previously, we're now getting essentially weekly updates on what are the last step in the process, the sort of settlement fine issues, not to mention everything that comes before it. And so what you'll see through several of these is that one of two things happens, right? There is either a negotiated settlement, which is where the fine comes into place. Generally, what I've seen thus far in the industry is if you're $5,000 and under, it's probably a technical fine. It's probably something related to the metric system. It's probably something related to mislabeling. Something in your POS system is not lining up with something in the state's database. Things like that. Once you get above that, it tends to be more serious from what we've seen thus far, up to and including state putting you on that blacklist that I mentioned previously, where the business is shut down, license is revoked, license will not be reissued, ownership group and ownership individuals are no longer a part of the industry. And that list grows. It doesn't grow quickly, but it grows on a month or 2 month basis. We get a new one of those on a regular basis. What I will say about all of our applicants, that none of them are none of those appear to be those types of operators. We appear to have gotten applicants that are both financially stable across the board and not in major issues. And so taking the Zone 1 applicant, Herbana, as the guinea pig here since they're the first one, they were the first one open in Ann Arbor and have had no issues there, either locally or from a state level. And either at either of their facilities. The Lansing facility is the only one that's had any issues, and it was relatively recently, as I understand it. They had some metric noncompliance that was withdrawn, and then the gram of cannabis that was found outside the dumpster, and a packaging issue. And so I think what we're seeing, especially now that the state has taken a more aggressive but warranted approach, is that even the technical violations are getting issued at this point, which is good. We want good operators. We want people to follow the rules because this is the most regulated industry I think I'm aware of outside of like nuclear waste kind of things. And so it's probably the most regulated industry that the average person is going to run into. And long-term, what we want is for everyone to be in compliance so that we can start paring that back a little bit, because all that regulation costs the government a lot of money to address. There's only so much we can claw back from the way these laws are structured in terms of the taxation and fees. So I am fairly comfortable with saying with all the applicants that none of these are violations that have caused me to have concerns bringing them to the board. Because frankly, we probably would have had that conversation with them and recommended they withdraw. Because none of us want to have a very awkward conversation in public about how bad your violations are.
Thank you.
Any of the board members with questions or comments? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson. So the lease agreement in this one expired in November 2023.
I believe they have an
Don't
extension
see-
in there.
I couldn't see the extension, because I know they can apply for an extension.
Their lease, they have 3 5-year options, and I believe on page, his documents are all so long. We can confirm that.
Okay.
I'm not flipping to it right now because this lease is going on forever. But I believe they have executed an extension of that lease because I've also had a conversation with the property owner here who wanted to understand where the process was before they extended it.
Right, because I see in the renewal option, it says 3 to 5 year options. They could apply for it 180 days prior to the expiration. With 3 to 5 additional years, I just didn't see where that was, if it was supplied, and I would like to see that as part of this application.
We can confirm that.
In addition, there are 2 names listed in the board of the directors. Article 2.3, board of directors states that they have 3 directors. In the July 15, 2019 Board of Directors meeting only listed 2 board members. Is that an effective legal meeting? Do they have to have 3 directors at that meeting? Because I see 2 directors' names listed twice. I don't see 3 directors.
My understanding is this corporation only has 2 directors. That's all I've seen in the paperwork. And in my research of this, I'm not sure. Oh, okay.
Do they have to have more than 2 or 2? Do you know what the?
Technically, you can form a corporation with any number, really.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll confirm that it's just Mr. Daly and Mr. Joel, but that is, our understanding all along has been that is the corporation.
Okay, so if they only have 2 directors, the board of directors shouldn't state that it has 3 directors, then it should state that it has 2 directors.
Yeah, I think you found a typo in their documents.
Okay. So under the harmony and support with other communities section, it states that the applicant intends to operate the facility as prepackaged. What if that operation model changes? What happens? Is the applicant held to that type of operation or any other type of operation, or do they come back to the board if they want to change it? What happens?
Yeah, so our position on this is currently that would be a material change to their application and would need to be disclosed at the time of renewal. And we would have that conversation as to whether or not additional steps need to be put in place to address the modified operations. I can tell you that they have zero intention of doing that. They were willing to put that in their SUP for the medical license with the planning commission because that's their model. But yes, our position is currently, from a staff perspective, that would be a material change to the application, would require further review.
Okay. And then the sign permit is dated January 9th, 2023. Will a new sign permit be needed?
Absolutely. I'm not sure why we continue to require a permit at this point because
Okay.
I'm not issuing that as part of this.
Okay.
I think what we were trying to do is just get as much information as we could. I thought we had changed that to just sign plan, but we did not, it turns out. And so, yes, they'll absolutely have to get a new permit to move forward with the installation of the sign or the change of the sign.
And so I assume that this sign is like, I saw it in the plans, but I assume that the store is going to look like the store on Saginaw?
I think it's intended to be similar, yes, similar branding, yes.
Do you know how many curbside parking spaces they'll have and ADA spaces? I didn't know if that was a requirement or.
I don't believe they have any plans to change anything to the current striping of the parking lot. They intend to take the space as is, so it would be as it currently lays out.
Okay. Do you know what that is or?
There are, the ADA spaces for this shopping center are closer to the spa, if I remember correctly, on the eastern end of the building. Although there were a couple of spaces, there's one space I think at the far western end as well by where the old 7-Eleven is. It's not striped properly, which we'll have a conversation with the landlord about. But the way the ADA is set up, you spread them out so that it covers the most space. You don't want to put them all in the same space. So there's no intention of putting one specifically for this location. And in terms of specific parking on the exterior. They've not indicated they'll be signing anything specific for this, but that is something that we would review during the site plan process.
Okay, so when you review it during the site plan process, do you, I don't know if you do this for every development or business that comes before the township, or if there's specific requirements for this industry regarding ADA compliance, ramps, parking spaces?
No, there's nothing specific for this industry, but we do an ADA check with any site plan that comes in, because things change over time, right?
Yeah.
A curb moves, a parking space gets moved, and so we want to make sure that anything that comes in is compliant. And so occasionally we do run into situations like this, where I can tell you just from looking at the aerial photo, it's not striped right. And so we'll call that out when we get to the site plan review here, that they need to have the owner properly stripe the ADA spaces for the slot.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board members? Overall, I think this application had a lot of what we asked for, as they all did, frankly. I think that, the relative low profile that comes with the signage, the security plan covered a lot of ground. And I thought that the application was overall very thorough. I didn't see anything in this, especially given the fact that this was the only application for this zone. I didn't see anything in this that raised for me any red flags for this particular operator. The violations I did review, some of them were things like the printer ran out of color ink, which
Right.
that's gosh, if I got fined $2,000 for every time my printer ran out of color ink, I'd probably owe HP. So no, I didn't have anything in here that I noted that was particularly problematic. So with that, and no other applicants that would have come forward during the window for competitive review, I see no reason why not to move forward with this application. Any final thoughts? Seeing none, looks like we'll hopefully see this before us at a future meeting.
Yes, we will have this back to you at a future meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 13A2 is the Zone 4 application. And we'll turn things right back over to Director Schmidt once he gets his papers shuffled in the appropriate fashion.
Thank you. If nothing else, I am good at producing paper. So this is your applicant on Hagedorn Road. I'm just gonna steal this from Stephen real quick and flip over to that. So right here, this is the railroad, CSX, this is not the CSX one, this is the other railroad track. Going, CN, thank you. Running east-west in Mount Hope, just on the north side of the inset map here. And so this is the property south of the railroad tracks. This includes the office building, and then large vacant piece of property and a couple of houses. The applicant in question is the same as the medical application. And as I mentioned, they are proposing to reuse the house this time as opposed to building new. And so again, happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant is here this evening to discuss further, if you have questions of them as well.
Thank you, Director Schmidt. Treasurer DeShane.
Yeah, I have a few questions on this application. First one is, it is such an incomplete application. I'm surprised this even was brought to the board.
So let me make one distinction for you. So the application is technically complete because it meets the provisions of the non-zoning ordinance. The concern I think you're raising is one that the review committee also raised, is that it largely did not address the competitive review criteria. And so what you're seeing is a bit of a disconnect between the two. I think the hope was most of the applicants would look at both documents and develop their application based off of both. Whereas this one really went off of what was required to be submitted and the previous medical application. So from staff's perspective, we reviewed it for completeness. It met the, and you'll hear me say this again, it met the bare minimum of completeness. But during the public hearing, we did recommend to them that they submit additional information, and that was provided in their addendum.
You talk about this being one of the most regulated industries that are around, and yet they seem to have a very laissez-faire approach. I mean, nothing at all about order control. I mean, we've been at this for 6 years in this board, and the order mitigation has been a huge issue from the start. It was even back with medical, and they have no response to that. We were promised shiny new facilities that would be, you know, a real investment in the community, something that we'd be proud of to have these facilities housed in. Now we're getting a house that already is in need of rehab and rehabilitation. No information on financial background. None provided whatsoever. No signage details, no community outreach. You had to fill in the blanks for them in this response, so they didn't seem like they were just thumbing their nose at us completely, it appears, staff did. If they're at this level of kind of barely meeting the minimum criteria of what we're asking for, when they're still asking for an application, I can only imagine how bad it's gonna be if we give them an approval, how non-responsive they're likely to be. They're showing us who they are in this incomplete application. And I think it gives me on this board, and I hope other board members, concern about approving an application that's so incomplete as this one is.
Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson. I agree with Treasurer DeShane. I am disappointed in the lack of information provided regarding the security measures, regarding financing, regarding community plan, regarding the odor, if I say that correctly. And in addition, the left turn signal. I do think I travel Hagedorn Road frequently, and going from north to south, and I do think that there are left turn signal issues along that route, including the access to the College Fields neighborhood that's just south of Bennett Road, where the left turn lane isn't stretched far enough. In addition, this location would be nearer to the railroad tracks where there would be a backup issue. So I would like to see this addressed in an application. I know that road very well. I know the backup points, and I do think it is an area of concern. And so I don't know if this can go back to the drawing board for a more thorough application, what the process is, but that would be, I would like to see a more thorough application with these items addressed in it and have it come back before the board. I don't know what the process is. You'd have to tell me.
So from a process perspective, the board is welcome to open a window at whatever point they want to accept applications. You are under no obligation to ever open another window. You've met the minimum obligation that was established under the ordinance.
So we could deny this application and a new application would have to come through? Is that what I hear you saying?
So if you were to deny this application, you would have to reopen a window to accept applications for them to be able to resubmit. They cannot just resubmit. This isn't
Okay.
a general zoning perspective.
So the window opens and anybody could resubmit, including
Correct.
this applicant?
Anyone could submit, period,
Okay,
depending on how we open the window.
all right.
I think that caveat is why we strongly encourage them at the review committee to provide additional information. Because there is no good process for resubmitting. In fact, there isn't one. What would happen is an appeal of the denial, and we'd go through an administrative process internally. It would actually come back to the board technically under the appeal process. And then that appeal decision would be appealable to the circuit court.
Is that house that they want to convert the only house that's right there?
No, there are two houses there.
And not owned by the same property owner?
They are owned by the same property owner.
Okay.
Please wait.
Because I too have share the same concerns as Treasurer DeShane regarding the current condition of that property and the ability to demonstrate professional business ownership in that location. Those are all of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Guthrie. I shared a number of the concerns that were brought forward so far. What I will say is the additional materials as provided by the applicant, I thought were helpful in illuminating a number of answers to some of the questions that were raised, specifically the financial and business operations plans, as well as some of the security concerns. I totally understand the question about, if they can't fill out the application to our standards, what can we expect from them in the future? However, I'd say that the counterpoint to that is that they worked with township staff to fulfill the totality of the questions and obligations that we had for them. So that to me, it's sort of six of one, half dozen of another, because part of what, the compliance question is going to be, will they respond when asked, right? When issues are brought before them. So I think generally, I would lean towards supporting this proposal with the additional information that was provided by the applicant. I would certainly say that this was, not that we are to compare them, and so I won't. But this was the application that I had the most trepidation in, specifically because of the lack of completeness of the original submission. However, I'm not saying that I would vote against it. I'm just saying that I think it's something that it does a little bit speak to the nature of the applicant themselves. So yeah, I'm of two minds about this one at the moment, and I'll leave it at that for now. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. My greatest concern here was looking at the nature and number of violations to Blue Sky Cannabis, which I think, Mr. Baldori, you may own. Is that correct?
Castle Rock Enterprises.
But you're a DBA, correct?
DBA Stone Depot. No, I'm the owner of Blue Sky.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. The number of violations at the Jackson facility, such as employing an underage employee, and the quality, the materials being dispersed and so on, were a greater concern to me than probably anything. So also, this was the promissory note, I believe, for $440,000 that they were using for financing. Do I have the correct application?
Yes.
I'm having trouble bringing it up.
Correct.
Seems insufficient. So that was my other concern. Do they have sufficient financial resources to be able to do the remodel, the parking, the lane cut, all the different things that they have to do to make that parcel work? Do you have any comments on that, Director Schmidt?
As a general rule, this is one of the few things that we get into the financial side on, is a project like this. They've certainly got a few roads to hoe still to get to a building, and I think that is reflected. I think the financial state of play is reflected in the fact that they are proposing to reuse the existing building as opposed to building new, which it's 6 of one, half dozen of another from our perspective. We've got applicants doing both. They have the information they provided in terms of cost estimates for the renovation and work they need to do are reasonable. It's not that they're like lowballing things. I think it's gonna be a little tight just because it's construction. Everything can goes wrong. But I wouldn't say that their estimates are out of the ordinary for the construction of the facility.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think you did raise something that may have been addressed earlier, but I'd ask the applicant to come to the podium, please, just to answer a question or two relating to the violations, if you would, please.
Sure.
So
I can speak to violations.
I just want to be absolutely clear from what I understood in what was discussed during the public hearing. Mr. Pernick, who is with Blue Sky, has no violations. Is that accurate?
We have notices of non-compliance, I think. We have like these warnings that they send out, but we don't have any violations.
Okay. And then.
I mean, we don't have any sort of formal complaint from the state.
Thank you. And then, Mr. Balduri, you are a minority silent partner of the Jackson facility,
That's correct.
and you're not an operator of that facility.
Correct. Although I've been helped with certain legal functions at the facility, especially like once something does happen, I've addressed it after.
Do you work in day-to-day compliance?
I wouldn't say day-to-day compliance, but if there's an inspection, I'll be in communication with the manager about that inspection, and then we'll do a follow-up conversation afterwards in terms of addressing the concerns brought by the CRA.
Okay. Do you have any response to the questions and concerns raised here about the financial plan?
Sure,
Mr. Pernick can address the financial aspects.
Thank you.
Yeah, would you like me to start with that? I had a few other comments, responses on some of the concerns that were raised. I was just concerned that the addendum wasn't received necessarily by everyone. Because
I believe we received the addendum that was
We all
provided
received
to
it.
us, yes.
Because just in terms of the odor control, we were pretty descriptive in terms of the odor control measures. And we've never had an issue with odor control, ever. We've never had a single complaint when it comes to odor control in our facility. Many people don't even smell you can't smell cannabis on the outside. So, I mean, it's very detailed in what we submitted originally and in the addendum. So that was brought up. I wasn't sure if folks had seen that aspect of it, but it's been very detailed, and we've never had, we have a great relationship in Belleville with the city. We've never had a single ordinance violation. Not a single one. We've never had a single problem with the city. So our compliance track record is, at least in Blue Sky, and I can say as a manager, our compliance track record is actually impeccable, with not a single fine from the municipality or from the state. So, as far as the reuse of the house, that was something that we were told was a positive in our discussion with the review committee meeting, because they said that it would reuse an existing structure, and it would have less of a environmental impact or land use impact. That's what we were told. So in terms of the comments that were mentioned about constructing new, I'm sorry, I'm a little taken aback by some of the comments. We were told that it was a positive by one of the members of the review committee, I think multiple, that would be a positive thing. And we did that specifically to lower cost, and because the property sits on an area that, I think the back part is a wetland, or most of it is, it's a beautiful area. I got stung about 20 times by hornets, but we wanted to reduce the ecological impact as much as possible. So that's the reason why we tried to have as limited a footprint. In terms of the traffic, we submitted a 20-page traffic study that was done previously for the prior application, in which I believe prior application was for, approved based on that. And so it was, we didn't conduct a study again. We didn't think that that was necessary, but it was an extremely detailed study. As far as the cost element, I own a small construction company that we're using to build another store in Ecorse. It's just, we have 3 employees, and we do a lot of the work ourselves. We don't make money on the project, but we do a lot of our work internally. We'll contract out for specific trades. So in terms of the number and the cost, I mean, we're trying to save as much money as possible, candidly. And so somebody who's a partner of mine who has the promissory note, that is listed, right? She's not a partner in this project, but she's a partner in another project. But it's a lower amount, frankly, because we're doing a remodel. And it's just not it's not an enormous amount of square footage to remodel. So we'll have to demo it. We'll bring it down to the studs. I don't think we're gonna have to redo the flooring. The flooring is in pretty good shape, and we'll have to do a lot of ADA work to make sure that it's ADA compliant. So we'll redo the bathrooms. But we're actually remodeling a house right now in the city of Ecorse, and we're almost at occupancy, getting a certificate of occupancy. We've done a lot of, basically all the rough work is done, essentially. We're just doing the finish work, the rough electricals, I mean, all of it. So we have done work on a house before. And again, that was the feedback, and I say it, sorry, with all due respect, and I hope that folks don't take it the wrong way, but we were told that remodeling the house was a positive, and we thought that that would make it easier for approval from an environmental and ecological perspective. And in terms of the violations, again, most of the violations that are listed there have nothing to do with the operator of this facility. We were required to list all the violations from any of the members of our company. But Marcus is a member of another company. He's a passive member of another company. He's a passive member of this company. He's not involved in the day-to-day management of the Hagedorn facility. And so in terms of our record as an operator, again, I would put our record against any other cannabis operator in the state. So I'm, in terms of Blue Sky Cannabis go, I can't speak for what somebody else who's a member of another company with no control may have done. And I could tell you that we have not done any of those things. So I understand the concern. But from our perspective, we have literally a perfect record of compliance, we think. There have been a couple of cases where the state changed a rule, and it took us a day or two to adjust. So hopefully that addresses the.
Thank you very much. Could I add something, please? About the violations, I understand the member did have a concern about that, just very briefly.
Please.
Everything Sam just stated is accurate. You referenced the employee situation, the underage employee. As was referenced earlier, for a medical retail facility, you can hire someone who's 18 or at least 18 or 19 and up. I believe that that facility was licensed for medical first. The individual was on board. Adult use was added, and the operators at the time were not clear that that didn't jive with the adult use criteria. Immediately, when the inspector came through and noticed that, immediately terminated him and immediately addressed the situation, updated the SOPs, and moved forward. And as the CRA has developed, what I've noticed is they'll come in, and if there's a rule that needs to be clarified or something that needs to be adjusted, they're not going to initiate a violation right off the bat like that. But sometimes that has happened. That's why when it was referenced that the CRA has used a heavy stick in some situations, they'll come in and just issue a violation right off the bat. They've been doing that less and less as I've seen the industry evolve, where they'll say, okay, if this is something that that you need to be complying with. They'll give at least an opportunity if the facility wasn't on notice or wasn't aware of a particular detail, but at least they'll have an opportunity to correct that, so a violation isn't issued off the bat. It might be a warning or just a verbal, okay, correct this, send us a picture that this is corrected, something along those lines. In this instance, it was immediate, just a violation was issued, and the issue was addressed immediately. And I think that's consistent with all the violations that were indicated for that. There were many that were withdrawn for being over, there was video footage that was supplied. We clarified that, and then they withdrew the complaint. They really did initiate some violations just right off the bat without an opportunity. The CRA has been a lot better about that as the industry has evolved.
Thank you. I'll just finally add that I personally don't have any issue with the reuse of a building that's already on the property. I do see that as a positive thing. It's going to maintain the character of the surrounding area. And quite frankly, you may not be able to build anywhere else or bigger on this property anyway. So, you know, I think what you've seen is you were dealing with three members that were not board members of the review committee. They all have their opinions, and they have a job to do, which is to review the application for completeness and provide a report to this board. The 7 of us, 5 of us here tonight, and 2 who will be here probably the next time that you come before us, are totally different people. And we have our own opinions and thoughts on these things. And what was probably speculation at the review committee on the suitableness of building new versus reusing the current building was indeed that speculation. So from my perspective, I have no issue with the reuse of the building, so long as you meet all the building criteria that Director Schmidt's office is going to impose upon the remodel and all that, and you have all your permits in order. That's no issue to me personally. Trustee Trezise.
Yeah, and this has been an interesting conversation, both from the gentleman here, from the board, and I guess one of the things that, and I'll probably support this also, but I think I don't have a problem with reusing the building, but unless we look at the addendum, the original application was extremely weak. And that makes me concerned about the follow-through that may or may not happen as other information requests are made, and just demonstrates a lack of seriousness in the application, which bothers me a bit. But I think with the addendum, many of those issues are covered. It shouldn't have taken an addendum to get that information. It should have been included in the first application. So that is a concern I have. And we'll take this up at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Any further comments? Treasurer DeShane.
I do have an issue with repurposing the building. The other 2 buildings we are repurposing are commercial buildings. You have an old house that was likely used, in that location, likely used as a student rental, I'm guessing, for many, many years. And I'm glad you're taking it down to the studs, but I'm not sure that's even enough to provide the security, fire suppression, odor control, and other issues that are essential to these facilities. You mentioned your construction company has just finished a house. Do you have any experience with commercial buildings?
So actually, what I was saying is that we were remodeling a house for a dispensary in Ecorse.
Okay.
So we were remodeling it for commercial purpose. And I certainly take your point that it is actually a big pain in the behind to remodel a house for a commercial building. And it has, it involved more than we realized, and it was a fair amount of work. And so I certainly appreciate, and I agree with, I understand the skepticism when it comes to it. We felt like, frankly, this house on Hagedorn, it has some, I mean, the stonework is very, very, I don't know if folks have seen it. It's a very, I think, beautiful house, in my opinion. and I think it could look really nice. The stonework is, and the architecture, you know, to me, feel like it goes with the area. And so you know, maybe I'm just too sentimental, but we felt like that was an opportunity to try to do something as opposed to just knock something down. In terms of security, I don't think that there'll be security issue at all. So what we did in eCourse, in terms of security for product, is it's interesting. So generally speaking, cannabis retailers will have a specific vault that they'll use to store their product in, right? So that it's protected against robbery. What we decided to do, but the problem with that is that all the product on the showroom floor that isn't in the vault isn't necessarily insured, it isn't necessarily protected. There's a problem, right? And you want to try to provide the strongest possible deterrence for theft. So what we did in the eCourse project is that we tore everything down to the studs and we installed 9-gauge wire mesh, which takes about, we had to cut through it in order to put in some of our bulletproof glass customer windows. It took a whole day to do that. And so you take it down to the studs, you install this 9-gauge wire mesh, then you can install drywall or paneling over it. And so that's a pretty aggressive security measure. I don't know many businesses that have that. And what we did in Belleville is we installed 4-ton bunker blocks, which you can't tell are bunker blocks because they're covered by planter boxes. There are these massive 4 feet tall, well, it's not 4 feet tall planter boxes that basically surround the entire property because the quote-unquote smash and grab is an issue that dispensers have been dealing with. So those are two, I think pretty aggressive steps in terms of security to make it very, very difficult. Not to mention the fact that you have steel security doors, you have electronic, locks to ensure that you can monitor who's going through any door and you have secure access, right? I think every single door except the bathroom door in eCourse and same for Belleville is it's these big, these $1,000 security doors with the steel frame and it's very difficult to get through. So what we did in eCourse is made it more of a fortress, candidly. We were actually worried that it would create a Faraday cage situation. For folks who are unfamiliar, if you enclose something in too much steel, you could actually block out the ability to get cell phone reception. So that was not a problem. And so we've been working around that. But it's an incredibly intense and aggressive security measure. That's on top of the security cameras. That's on top of internet backup, generator, so you have backup power. And you need backup internet because if you lose latency, if your latency is low, or if you have some sort of problem with, for us, it's Comcast, we have problems constantly, we have a backup so that that kicks in and then you can still retain access to your cameras and everything else. So I would, short of installing like a turret or something like that in our dispensary, I would say that we have a extremely aggressive security plan in terms of hardening the building and the ability and making it very difficult for anyone to get inside. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but I would say extremely difficult. I mean, the idea is you want to create enough of a barrier and you want to harden the property enough so that by the time that somebody starts, law enforcement can get there, and you can stop whatever is going on. So in terms of odor control, I think what we included was that we have carbon filters throughout our facilities. Those do a remarkable job of taking the odor out of the air. But I'll also note that I think the benefit of this location, and perhaps why it was chosen as a zone, is that we don't have any neighbors. So not to say that, obviously we want to be in compliance regardless, but I would be shocked I'd be very, very shocked if anybody complained. Yes, I'm sorry.
I think Treasurer DeShane still has the floor.
No, thank you for addressing my questions. I hope you can do what you want to do there and can preserve this building and make it a secure commercial building. But again, if you're already tight for cash, I think this is going to press you even further to try and rehab this house into a secure cannabis facility.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're tight for cash. We put together what we thought was a reasonable estimate based on our current projections. If we need more cash, we can always get more cash. That's not really a concern. But we try not to spend more than we have to, candidly, so.
Clerk Guthrie?
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. I don't know how to say this, so I'm going to be candid, but I feel as if the more you explain things, the more conflicting information I hear you saying in comparison to the actual application and the work that's to be done. And I heard you say, bring things down to the studs, then I heard you say you're in love with this and you're sentimental, and then I'm reading the description of what's going to be done on the property to the current house, and I don't see specifics in regards to some of the security measures that you're talking about, or in regards to odor that you're talking about. I don't see that in the description of what's going to be done to the house, and I think maybe I didn't explain myself very well. It's not that I don't want a house to be reused and repurposed, because I do like the repurposing of things versus empty land being used. And I understand the cost that it takes for plumbing and electrical and all that sort of thing. I get that. My issue is that I'm not confident in the ability of the work for this particular project to be carried out based on the application that's before me tonight. That is what I'm saying. I did not mean to say that I did not think a house should be used. I'm concerned about the work being carried out and how long it's going to take. And I am concerned about the traffic and the left turn lane. That's what I'm saying. And that was not a question, and it wasn't an opportunity for a debate. It's just a statement.
Thank you, Clerk Guthrie. Any other comments or questions from board members? Thank you to the applicants for coming up.
Thank you.
So I think I hear a relatively divided board about how best to proceed. Since we are short of our 2 additional members, it may be prudent to put this on for discussion one more time at our next meeting, so that or the next available opportunity. I don't know if that's the next meeting, but to have it on for discussion one more time before we bring it up for action. I see some nodding heads. We'll let our 2 remaining members hear about or have a chance to review the application. And I know I've got a fine tooth comb to go back and, and read this one more time myself, because I missed the odor control. I'll have to go find that in the application materials. Director Schmidt, can we bring this back at a future meeting?
Absolutely. I serve at the will of Mr. Walsh, but follow the direction of the board in these matters. So we will, we have a crowded schedule, but we will come up with a solution to bring this back for discussion.
Thank you very much. We've been at this for 2 hours. I think we can take a 5-minute break, come back. We'll stand at recess for 5 minutes until 8:08. Will bring us back to order at 8:08 PM. Next item on our agenda is item 13A, 3, I guess, Zone 5. And we'll hand things back over to Director Schmidt.
Yes, thank you very much. Again, this is our applicant at just north of Jolly Road on Okemos. This is the applicant that is furthest along in their medical licensing process and is the most, staff would argue, most complete application that we received for recreational marijuana. Again, we'll turn it over to the board, answer any questions you might have. The applicant is here this evening to discuss this as well, if you have any questions of them specifically.
Thank you very much. Board members, we are on Zone 5's down at Jolly and Okemos. Any questions or discussion on this application? Trustee Wilson.
I found that the thoroughness and professionalism of the application and addressing the application questions thoroughly was really, as you said, a real example of how you go about doing things, and it shows their expertise in this area. I have no issues with this application. I think the location's appropriate. I think they are demonstrating that they understand the industry and will comply with all of our requests and also that of the CRA. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. Clerk Guthrie?
I concur with Trustee Wilson and appreciate the thoroughness of the application and the respect that you showed the board in this application. I appreciate that.
Treasurer DeShane.
I concur with the previous two comments. I mean, this is an applicant that we can understand will follow the rules of the application, completed it properly, filled it out, gave us thorough answers, and likely will stay in compliance with the law under operations, all of which points back to the deficiencies, possible deficiencies with the previous applicant who did none of that. So, yeah, this is an excellent application, and the fact they're furthest along is actually good news. We're going to have some up and going first who understands the industry and will do it right, at least based on their application.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not going to disagree with any of you. This was a good application. It does appear to be a very high-quality applicant with good experience. So.
Very good. And I concur. This seemed to be the most complete, most thorough, most professional application that we received. Not that we are judging them based on one another, but just based on the criteria, the answers that they provided to the criteria that were laid out before them. I, for one, am looking forward to having this in operation here in the township and being the model, as Treasurer DeShane indicated, for businesses like this, showing what they can be. Thank you very much. That's all I've got to say on that.
Thank you. We will work with the supervisor pro tem to schedule all of these back for either action or further discussion with all of the other moving parts we have going right now in other projects.
Sure. So just to summarize, since it's been a little while since we started this discussion item,
Yes, sir.
it sounds as though we have zones 1 and 5 coming back for action at the next opportunity, whatever that is. And zone 4 we'll have back for discussion one more time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up on our agenda is 13B, the 2024 Pathway Master Plan Update. And we have Deputy Manager Officer who's been waiting patiently since his last item.
Good evening, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson and board members. So I've got a relatively minor addition to what was the 2021 Pathway Master Plan, the last time that we undertook an update to the Pathway Master Plan. And so 1 year ago, I should say summer of 2023, we were contacted by some residents from the Briarwood neighborhood and Cavalier Drive. And it coincided, but it did not come about from the Safe Routes to School discussions for Okemos Public Schools. But it occurred at the same time that things were kind of devolving with the request to the Ingham County Road Department to engineer. And so that was just kind of in the back of our minds when this came in. So Township Engineer Yanis Ashredi and I took a look at it, looked at the existing conditions, looked at the development patterns, and determined that this would be a good candidate to add to give a safe route to school for the children that live in Briarwood and on Cavalier Drive, where they do have sidewalks in those neighborhoods. So those property owners chose to live in a neighborhood environment with sidewalks. And the gap that's represented there on the screen that we would be constructing this year would just kind of fill in that one gap as these children work their way south to Hiawatha Elementary. More or less, this is just one of those things similar to Alderwood and Silkwood, where during developments, some minor defects or infrastructure assets can be overlooked. And so we have this before you tonight. I would note that I would like you to hold off on any action on this item for two reasons. One of which is that Mr. Ashredi and I are talking about one other possible inclusion, and then Trustee Hendrickson had some thoughts for us on the legend and how we label the various assets, just ways to make that more intuitive and user-friendly for the public. Because we want this to be both an internal document, but also a public-facing document. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Board members, any questions? Treasurer DeShane.
The crooked red line, is that just a neighborhood delineation separating Briarwood from?
This line right here,
Yes.
Treasurer DeShane?
Yeah.
So that is actually that is a Consumers Energy right-of-way right there that cuts,
Okay.
it kind of divides Briarwood and Spring Lake. And that's actually kind of the final phase, or phase 5 of the Eastern Third Regional Trail, which you kind of helped inspire with your idea of how do we create a north-south leg. And it would dogleg west at Dobie Road and, well, in Lake Park, and as you approach Dobie Road, it would turn west, and then it would cut right there across Briarwood and Spring Lake.
Okay. Excellent idea.
That actually was my question about the legend, because it looked like, I think it's labeled cross-country path or something now. And I had asked if we needed to update this to include that Eastern Third path, and it turns out cross-country path means asphalt paved path, not concrete paved path. So hopefully we'll be seeing that.
I see that now,
We'll
yes.
be seeing that a little bit more spelled out as we look forward in the future.
What we're currently thinking of bringing back to you for the legend would be existing concrete pathway for the, this area of the legend. This would be proposed concrete pathway. Going down to the cross-country, this would become existing off-road paved trail or paved pathway. They're all pathway assets, so we want to stick with pathway.
Sure.
So again, this would be existing off-road asphalt pathway, and then proposed off-road asphalt pathway. So a little bit wonky, but we do like to know what is a concrete asset versus an asphalt asset, because we will go to this map to do quick delineation on the assets when we're doing various contracts. So at your previous meeting, we talked about the asphalt rejuvenator and crack fill treatments on the pathway system, and that's where we go. So we're looking for this line if we're looking for crack fill or asphalt rejuvenator, because that delineates where our paved trails are.
Thank you. This is not necessarily related to, this is a no-brainer of an update for the pathway that you're proposing here. I did have one other question, which was related to that Eastern Third path. Have there been any initial, just open the discussion conversations with MSU and Lansing about the possible connection west? That was a really interesting feature of that proposal that I was just looking to follow up on.
In some respects, yes. In so much as at several joint meetings, one of which is the annual joint meeting that we hold, or the Township Board holds, with all of our regional stakeholders. There, I did mention it last year in 2023 at that. And then when we were presenting to the Ingham County Parks and Trails Commission about the Phase 1 of the Eastern Third Regional Trail. We did have our regional map that you've all seen, where we show that proposed connection to the Lansing River Trail, kind of by the Dunkel Jolly intersection. And so we did the county is aware and various stakeholders there, but we still need to sit down and meet with MSU and the city of Lansing specifically. Right now, our grant application for Phase 1 is, I want to say, the funding would come in 2029, based on the current schedule. The first year of the millage renews, the millage would be put on the ballot for renewal in 2026. That would fund 2027. The initial revenue from 2027 is going to go to projects that are already being constructed, some of which are our own. And then the first year, we would receive funding for the Red Cedar River cleanup for that grant application. And then in the third year of the new millage revenue, we would receive the Eastern Third Regional Trail funding. At which point in time, we probably will need to request an increase, but we will cross that bridge at a later date.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. So on the, in this document, which I can't bring it up because my computer is freezing on this particular portion, does the owner change? I mean, I think I know what this means, but does the owner change after initial roll mean the ownership actually changed or the amount changed? And if the amount changed, how does that happen?
Are you referring to the order to maintain?
Yeah.
That's not what we're not on that one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just kidding. I'll save that for later. I jumped ahead. My apologies. Strike that.
Okay. Any questions on the pathway update?
Sorry about that.
Okay. I heard some general agreement toward moving this forward at the next opportunity. So we'll go ahead and see that at our next meeting.
Excellent. We will be back before you on the 16th. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up is agenda item 13C, the Central Fire Station Expansion Architect Selection. We've got Chief Hamill back.
Manager Pro Tem and Board, thank you for allowing me back. So last fall, Manager Walsh had a listening session of which some of my employees came and shared their concerns with our sleeping quarters not being gender neutral and some concerns as we continue to move forward and hire more females and such that we really need to look at our stations and specifically Station 91 where we house more of our people daily. So we have some more separate sleeping quarters, if you will. So with that, we ended up going out for RFP for an architect and some design possibilities, and we got it down to 3. That's what we replied. Director Schmidt, myself, and Melissa Massey, and working with Manager Walsh, we really looked through these extensively, kind of to break down what's their history, what's their skill, if you will, how many fire stations have they done in the past. And after looking at them all and actually calling a few of the communities from all 3 different proposals, we narrowed it down to Hobbs and Black. We did that because they have really extensive history in building fire stations. In fact, I can name a few. Lansing Fire is now using them for their new courts building and public safety building, a training tower, and they're rebuilding 2 fire stations and remodeling a couple, as well as Charlotte, Bath, Fowlerville, Ingham County Hall of Justice used them. Summit, Macomb, West Bloomfield, Northville, Novi used them for 2 stations. Plymouth used them for 2 stations. Ypsilanti, Lenox Township, Armada, and Madison Heights. So really with their extensive history, we really thought they, from start to finish, we really thought they had the better package. Now it's a little more costly, but we feel that they are going to give us a better product in the long run. You know, the cost they put in their proposal is what they believe. There's some things we think may not be used in there, so there's a chance it could come down. but we also believe with their history and we're not going to go over. We don't believe there'll be any big contingency in the end that we're going to have to worry about. This is really an easy project. It's 1,250 square feet, so there's not a lot to it. So we're just here to kind of bring it to you, answer any questions, and, eventually bring it to you to approve Hobbs and Black, if possible, to be our architect and follow it through to construction.
Thank you, Chief Hamel. Board members, any comments or questions? Trustee Wilson.
I'm aware of Hobbs and Black and have been for over 40 years. They have an excellent reputation. I was involved with them with a remodel to a commercial building many, many years ago. And if you look at the pro rata cost, they're offering us, instead of 354 to 368 hours of work, they're offering 603 hours, so the costs aren't that disparate. I'm 100% in favor of this, and I'll be voting yes on it.
Anyone else? Trustee Trezise.
Thank you. What was the extent of the RFP? What were you requesting from them? Is this going to be a construction
So,
as well as design?
yeah, so design, and I think Tim can really explain this because this is more his expertise, so I'll let him do that.
So we actually split this into two pieces. So we asked for a response essentially in two parts. First, we needed a full set of construction documents. So that at the end of part one, we could go to the street, bid it out, and build it if we wanted to. We did it that way because technically the board has not authorized funding of the project yet. And so the second part of the bid, the RFP, was a request to then take us through construction as essentially our owner's rep to occupancy.
Okay.
And so really what we're asking for is an architect to hold our hands from beginning to end with a pause in the middle while we make sure we're going forward.
Okay. That explains the cost from what Chief says is a very simple project, supervising the design and the construction documents as well as monitoring the building. This is a reasonable price, so.
Thank you, Tim.
Other board member questions or comments? Trustee Wilson.
Ready for a motion?
I don't think that's up for tonight, right? We're talking about bringing this back for action another time.
However you want to do it, but yes.
Thank you. Clerk Upton.
So, thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. So I see in these plans that there are 7 bunks.
Say that again?
7 bunks,
Yes,
7
correct.
rooms and 1 bathroom. Is this an additional, are there other bathrooms? I'm trying to imagine only 1 bathroom for 7 different bunks.
Yeah, so if you want to come over sometime, I'll give you a tour. So what we have is we have a male's locker room and a female's locker room. If you remember where our kitchen is down the hallway,
Yeah.
across from the weight room is the men's locker room. The hallway just before that goes outside to the east where this is going to be built is the women's locker room. And so the intent is that they're still going to have the room for their locker room, or they're going to have the ability to use their locker room. The reason that they suggested we put a bathroom in there, talking to really a lot of different individuals, is in the middle of the night, they get up, they don't have to walk all the way to the locker room. Plus, it's a separate, again, gender neutral, like the dorms will be. So that's really the intent there.
So there's other bathroom options, is
Yeah,
what I hear you
absolutely.
saying. Okay. And so I seem to recall when this was built, 2015?
2015, 16.
That they were building it to have separate quarters for males and females. Did we not anticipate at that time how many separate quarters we would need, or?
I'll let Manager Walsh talk to that. I was not here for that, so.
It was DLZ who did that one, correct?
DLZ.
Okay, yep.
Yeah,
Thank you for enlightening me.
so, actually, we broke ground just 9 years ago this past weekend. March 31st of 15.
See, I need to have a good memory on this.
It's not worth much.
It is to me, because I'm
Yeah,
curious.
to answer
so.
your question directly, DLZ was originally part of it, and then we opened the bids, and it was way too much and way too big. We scaled back. We never planned to have, we have separate locker rooms, but we didn't anticipate male-female living areas at all. We have an area, I believe the separate area was for the BC, and then there was like 4 or 5, but with our great expansion of the female candidates, that's what's led to this, because I think we have like 6 beds right now. Yeah.
Yes, 6.
6, yeah. So to answer your question directly, when we built it in 15, 16, we did not plan for gender equity at all.
Was the entire bond used for this, or did we have savings from that bond, or?
No, actually, we had a $3.2 million bond that was passed in November of 12, and the original bid that came in with DLZ's work was the lowest was 4.6 million. We eliminated 2 bays, the training tower, and scaled it back from 14,900 square feet to about just under 10,000 square feet, which sounds like a big reduction, but that station is still much larger than the other 2, which are about 7,000 square feet, and this one's about 10,000. We took off 50% of the building.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll be supportive of this when it comes back.
Okay.
This is something that that is clearly a need.
Thank you.
We've been talking about it for a while. And I think that my colleagues have highlighted a number of the reasons why we should go with Hobson Black. And so I appreciate that as well.
Okay.
All right, we'll see you next.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Next up on the agenda is item 13D, Greater Lansing Area Regional Stormwater Program, MOA. We've got Deputy Manager Opsom back.
Good evening, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson and board members. So since the early 2000s, Meridian Township and our neighbors have collaborated regionally in order to carry out our MPD ES2 and MS4 permit requirements. So this is largely dealing with stormwater drainage systems and protecting the waterways where that stormwater ultimately gets discharged to. So think, surface parking lots that have various contamination from pollutants to oil that then get washed into the catch basins and then are discharged. So we've been working regionally through the GLRC. Last fall in September, the GLRC met and finally adopted a updated memorandum of agreement. And so through this consortium of sorts, we get the benefit of reduced requirements that are put onto township staff, which frees up our resources for things like the local road program, order to maintain water and sewer projects, et cetera. But it also allows us all to hold each other accountable, right? Because our waterways are regional assets. The Red Cedar River spans and its watershed touches almost every member of the GLRC. So there's a multitude of benefits to this. So now all the regional entities are going back to their governing bodies to have them adopt the MOA as agreed upon by the GLRC and all the entities that comprise it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have on the updated MOA that is before you this evening.
Thank you, Deputy Manager Opsimer. Board members, any questions or comments? Clerk Guthrie.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem Hendrickson. Does the application, I see it's due to Eagle by April 4th. Is that correct? Are you looking for a decision tonight on this to renew?
No, we do not need a decision this evening.
Okay.
April 4th to 28th.
And I know that there is a lot of reporting requirements and elements that is involved with this. And so I just want to say that I appreciate the time that I know a multitude of different staff members take in participating in the Greater Lansing Stormwater Management Program. So I know it is time consuming, but it's a benefit to the entire community and I appreciate that.
I will be sure to extend that to Township Engineer Yanis Ashredi, who really oversees all of our MS4 permit requirements and does a phenomenal job with it.
Thank you. Other board members? Treasurer DeShane.
I see the original agreement was signed on or about May of 2004 and revised in December of 21. What are the major changes since the December 2021 adoption?
Giannis actually didn't give me a rundown of each and every change, so I can certainly bring that back and perhaps take the MOU and kind of mark it up and highlight what the specific changes are, but the general impression I got that there wasn't anything substantive.
Okay, so this is just cleanup of
The renewal period came up and
Okay.
they touched up a few items that had kind of come up since the last renewal. But generally speaking, housekeeping matters, but I'll highlight them when we put this back into the April 16th packet.
It's not critical, I'm just curious. Oftentimes, these documents, when they're in use, do show some deficiencies, and they got to be cleaned up. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer DeShane. Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. Anytime we're talking regional cooperation, it's almost always a good thing. So I'll be supporting this because we've got to work with our partners. We're not a standalone operation here.
All right. Trustee Trezise.
Yeah, and I'm looking through this, and I do believe there is a filing deadline of this Friday, April 4th,
Yes.
2024.
I'm trying to find where that is. I know
Yeah,
I
I just
saw
saw
it.
it too.
Are you referring to the last whereas?
It's 2020.
Yeah.
Term on Article 3, second paragraph. This is, replaces the agreement in its entirety for a period expiring April 4th as confirmed, but it says expiration of the current permit is October 1, 2024, and application will be due on April 4th. So that is not this MOU, it's for an application to Eagle.
So we're okay.
So we're okay.
Yes.
Fabulous.
And there's also an April 4th, 2028 in the resolution. for
Yes, the 2028 is the expiration date of this extension and the MOU, so.
Correct.
Just saw that
Thank you
big
for finding
black
that.
April 4, 2024, and says something's got to happen there.
Yeah. I knew I saw it somewhere. Thank you.
Yes.
Urgency not being required at this moment. We'll see you back next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is item 13E, the fire apparatus. And it looks like Chief Hamill's bringing backup this time.
Yes.
So, as you're aware, we took the ladder truck out of service permanently during litigation for safety reasons. So, as a contingency, we're talking to Manager Walsh, we've been looking at, what do we do with only 3 engines now, 3 pumpers, same thing. Generally, for our front line, we had the truck that would roll out of Station 91 as an ALS. It's a Quint, so it runs like an engine or a truck. And then we would have an engine at Station 92 and 93, and then 1 engine left over as our reserve if one breaks down. So now we're down to 3. We have a engine coming this fall. It's our current purchase. Sometime in September is the newest timeline, but there's been delays still with the amount of production and pieces and parts. That was set to replace our 25-year-old engine. Basically, the way we look at it with the replacement schedules, we should be replacing our engines about 20 years. Same thing with trucks. You also have to look at wear and tear over the life of them, how they're lasting. And I can tell you right now, our 1999 25-year-old has got lots of mechanical issues. So what we're forced to do, and currently we do today, starting yesterday, we are borrowing an engine because we had our middle engine, which is a 2008, is out for repair at Spartan. We were hoping it was only going to be out a day, but it's out today too. So we're borrowing an engine from Lansing Township, which Todd Hendy, their fire chief, is very gracious in allowing us anytime we need it. It's an extra engine for them. The biggest concern with borrowing an engine, we break it, we own it. I can tell you if the motor blows on it, that he's not had any issues, that's $40,000. So that's my biggest concern. If we get in an accident, someone hits us, it's totaled, we own it. So we're talking to Manager Walsh, we were looking at some different options. One of the options that came up recently is the company we're currently purchasing, the one that'll be delivered in September, also has a spec vehicle coming off the line in April. I call it the sister to the one we're buying. It's almost exactly the same. And so, you know, what are the options to potentially purchasing that? And Manager Walsh is going to cover that. But just a brief about our replacement schedule, just so you have an idea of how it would work. Currently, we are, the one this fall would replace our 1999 engine. The next engine is scheduled to be replaced in 2028, so just 4 more years. And right now, it takes 3 to 4 years to build one, so we would have to start considering buying one next year for 3 to 4 years from now. And then the next one is a 2016, which would be 2036. And then the ladder truck, depending on what happens with that, that would be a 2022, so 2042 replacement. So moving forward, if we were to potentially get a second engine, it would replace the 2028. We would still eliminate the 25-year-old one, but we would keep the next oldest until we get this resolved with the ladder truck, which could be a couple of years or more based on what our attorneys are thinking. So I'm going to let Manager Walsh come up and kind of talk about his thoughts on this and potentials.
Thank you, Chief Hamel. This is a difficult one because everything we've done in the last 10 years has been cash. And we haven't done anything where we've borrowed, where we didn't have the income stream to pay for it. But take a look. I was here, listening to this guy. I really trust his leadership. I want to say that first. Look at what we've done for public safety just in the last, I mean, if you just go back to the new fire station, we've gone from 30 to 36 paramedics. We've gone from 39 to 42 in the police department. And this board took a very, what I would say, progressive, big step forward, and a step that we shouldn't forget about. And that's when the bridge was closed. And we said, you know what? The safety of the people in this community is paramount. And we're going to spend the extra money, and we're going to put 2 paramedic firefighters in the South Station, 2 additional, for the next 3 months, at a great cost, by the way. You know, it exceeds $50,000, $70,000 to do that in overtime. And you did that. And I just remind what we've done for public safety. And this is another step tonight. This is a tough one because we've got this ladder truck out there that we're not sure about what's going to happen, and that's a mystery, and that could be a 3-year mystery for us. The choice before us tonight in the next few weeks, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time because this truck is available, and if we don't move forward with this truck, you know, then we are going to be at a 2 or 3 year period, probably 2027 or 2028 to get the truck, the next one. How do we finance it? I've already started working on I've never started an annual budget this early before, but I have to tell you, to be very forthright, I have some strong concerns about the 2025 budget, and I think I've started to share that with you. We have a dorm room project that isn't funded for 2025. And we have the striker. Remember the striker agreement we have for equipment? Remember the first year was this year, but that came out of ARP funding. Next year, I think that's $214,000. That will come out the first year out of the budget for next year, plus a dorm room project. So I can't recommend to you, as much as I want to, that we would go forward with this and say, well, let's take it out of the general fund, next year. There's not the capacity to do that. So if the board chooses, first of all, determines that this is a move that you want to make, it's a bold move to get both of these trucks now. If you decide to do that, I would recommend that we set up a financing plan with the company that offers a financing plan. But what I've also, many years ago in St. Joseph, we purchased a ladder truck with an installment purchase contract through a local bank. And so one of the things we could do, if we get somewhat of a favorable response from you tonight about how you feel about this, we'd immediately go and get some quotes from local banks on installment purchase contract and to see how that stacks up against what's being offered here by the company. So we can get so when we come before you on April 16th, if you want this back, if we're at all interested in doing this, I wouldn't go beyond April 16th with availability of the truck. So this is a big decision. I'm sorry that there's not a big time period for us to think through this, but here's where we're at. And so the recommendation would be to finance this over 10 years. Now, we are in a very strong financial position. And when we do the budget in July, August, September, we may look and we may be able to pay this down. I don't know right now, but I just can't recommend that we do. Let's put this off and fund it in the next year's budget with everything that we have going on. So one of the questions before you tonight is, do you want to move forward and look at this further? If you do, we'll go out and get installment purchase contract quotes from local banks, and we'll bring this all back to you with a financing plan on April 16th.
Thank you, Manager Walsh.
Thank you.
I don't think I heard at any point what the actual cost
Right.
of this truck would be.
Yeah.
So there's a couple adjustments they have to make to get, so in the back of our truck or engines, we have it configured in a way so we can put ALS equipment when we run it as an ALS engine. So they have to change a little bit of the compartment space. And then there was a couple other things, I can't remember what they're called. So roughly right now, we're looking at about $950.
950,000.
Yeah, it's almost double what it cost 2 years ago.
Right now, we have a quote, it's around, I think, 5%.
5.5,
5.5. And I think we're looking at payments that exceed $100,000 per year over 10 years. But we do want to go out and see if local banks have a better offer than that, and we believe that they might.
Okay. Board members, trustee Trezise.
Thank you. From a security and safety standpoint, I don't see we have a choice. I think we need to pursue this and see what we can do. If we're fiscally sound for the next couple of years, it can be prepaid or paid off early and we can cut costs there, but I don't like the idea of using a 25-year-old truck in emergency situations. That's the reason we took the ladder truck out, because it wasn't dependable. You can't depend on a 25-year-old fire truck.
I wasn't.
Trustee Wilson.
Thank you, Supervisor Pro Tem. We're only looking at the consideration of purchasing this one truck, because the other one already we have funded.
Yes, the other truck is around 550 to 600.
It's amazing
And-
how that cost has
Yeah, and we
escalated.
received a state grant of about 3 years ago for about $225,000. Deputy Manager Opsmer was involved with that when he was at the legislature. And then the rest of it is coming out of the motor pool. It's already funded. So the first truck is fully funded.
So,
The total cost on that vehicle was like $580, right around
That's-
$580.
I'm stunned by the price of this one. Would there be, in looking at that financing contract from the company, there's no penalty for prepayment?
I don't think there was any penalties for paying it off early.
That's what I mean.
There was no down payment requirement, and then I was reading it today, there's really, once you enter into it, you can do whatever you want with it, as long as you pay your annual. And you can pay a little bit down or pay nothing down.
So say in the next 24 months, we settle with the ladder company, and we settle favorably, and we end up getting a replacement ladder truck. Then what happens? How does that scenario play out?
So then we would have the 2028 replacement truck to deal with. And my thoughts would be we just would sell that or auction it off early.
Okay.
We wouldn't be in a position to have to even look at another vehicle till 2026. Or 2036, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Depending, and again, with the ladder, if they pay us for it, because there's the different options, if they end up just giving us our money back, potentially with some additional, we still have to order a new truck, which is gonna be 2 to 3 years.
So we could then pay off this truck? If we
could, but
were
then
to
we're gonna
get
have to
some
pay
kind
the
of cash
difference.
proceeds from the dispute over the lemon truck?
We could, but then we're still gonna have to pay the difference on a new truck. I can tell you the truck
Yes.
right now is worth $1.4 million. The one that we paid $890 for.
Yeah.
We also plan to go to a couple local banks, one that we just joined up with and moving all of our assets to, and having a very candid conversation with them about a good interest rate. I think this truck, if we move forward, if the board chooses to move forward, I think it'll be funded through a local bank, through an installment purchase contract.
Again, no penalty for prepayment if we can pay it off early,
That's correct.
or make a larger payment as we've done with our pension fund.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a whole, and that, excuse me if I may, Supervisor Pro Tem, that's a whole nother issue too, because we have that third leg of, there's some funding available depending, we get our actual report in May, June for 2023, that 74%, the rest of them are they're almost 100% funded, one is.
Right.
And this one, we should be in the high 70s. We're gonna be able to take a look at that third leg of the pension that we were paying. This year, it's 800,000. From that 5 to 7% difference on rate of return. So we may have a much better cash flow in 25 than we expect, depending on how things play out in the next 3 or 4 months. We may be able to attack this at a much rapid rate than we think.
Good. All right, thank you. Those are my questions and comments.
Treasurer DeShane.
I agree with Trustee Trezise. This is kind of a no-brainer. This is public safety involved, both in human life and in the assets. We have a very high valuation. We have about $5 billion in physical assets in this township, and we need to make sure we are going to protect them against the fire hazard. And not to mention the health hazards that our fire department deals with every day. So we need to act on this.
Clerk Guthrie.
I concur with trustee Trezise and treasurer DeShane. I mean, I wouldn't drive my personal vehicle around for 25 years. I can't imagine that we have a life-saving vehicle out there for 25 years. It's actually a scary thought. So it's a no-brainer, and I appreciate the time and commitment and the cooperation that the two of you have had in figuring out a solution to bring to the board. I know it's been a long time that you've been working on this together. And so I look forward to seeing this at the next meeting.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said as well, and certainly appreciate the generosity of Lansing Township in working with our fire department to make sure that we are covered. With public safety, you don't mess around. It certainly has been a laudable thing to have been able to have the luxury to pay cash for all of these wonderful things that we've gone out and done over the last 10 years. But there's no shame in taking out a loan to pay down something this important. This is something that we have to do. So I absolutely would support going out and doing this and finding a way to ensure that our residents are well covered, continue to be well covered, while we work out the legal nonsense with the ladder truck. So I just want to be clear, we had, prior to all this, we had 3 pumpers, and the ladder truck. The ladder truck going out, we'll now have 4 pumpers, essentially. Three under reserve.
Yeah, if we were to move forward, we'd still eliminate the 25-year-old pumper, and then we would still have 4, yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, well, that makes total sense. I did note, and this is why I was scrolling for a minute here, I seemed to recall that we had a healthy fund balance in our motor pool, and that was something that we were talking about a fair amount at the last budget hearing. From what I see here, it looks as though we've got 600,000. And of course, some of that we have budgeted, or most of it we have budgeted. Is that an area we can tap into a little bit more than we had planned for something like this to bring the amount that we're borrowing down?
Yes.
Okay. So it might be worthwhile to look at that as well, as I'm sure you would, as we move forward with that. I hear a lot of yeses, so it looks like we'll hear back from you in 2 weeks on that.
Very good.
We're
Thank
doing
you.
a lot of that in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Next up on the agenda is item 13F, the Policy Review Working Group. This item was brought forward by myself and Trustee Wilson, so I'll give a very brief introduction. We have, over the course of my time on the board, the last 2 years, taken up several policies over the span of that 2-year period that have been outdated and need updating and review. I think that, we've sort of taken it one-off. We haven't had a system in place to address these things on a repeated basis and go through sort of what the policies and procedures are, and how do we get those moving a little more quickly, so that we don't end up in a situation where we are outdated significantly and continuously. My recommendation was to put together, our recommendation, I should say, was to put together a small working group consisting of board members and staff to identify, review, and if needed, revise some of the most outdated or most needed policies that the township has. Our recommendation for specifically for who would be involved in this would be 2 board members, and we had identified Trustee Trezise for his background in HR and legal expertise, and Clerk Guthrie, who has shown a passion for this subject and in making sure that we are in compliance with our own township policies. In addition to the manager or the manager's representative and HR, who has obviously a vested interest in compliance with those policies. And then lastly, a rotating member, and this is important because we took up the credit card policy with the finance director. There will be staff members who would have valuable insight to weigh in on these matters specific to their subject area of expertise. And so give the working group latitude to bring those staff members in and include them in the policy discussions and updates. So that was our proposal for this. If we have agreement, we'll hopefully bring this back in a couple of weeks as well. Any thoughts or discussion on that? Or Trustee Wilson, did you want to say anything else on it?
I just want to say that we look at this as a rolling process. So as each policy is addressed and comes to consensus with a review group, it can be brought back to the township board and we'll work incrementally to make these updates.
That's a good point. Yeah, no need to wait for everything to be done and updated to bring it back.
Baby steps.
Goodness, that would be a long meeting. So we'll take them one thing at a time.
For sure.
Any other questions or comments? No? Trustee Trezise?
Well,
We
since
voluntold you for something.
Your name's been taken in
Since my
vain.
name has been taken in vain, as Trustee Wilson has just said, I would be pleased to do this. As a matter of fact, revision of the employee manual was something that Mr. Walsh mentioned to me before I was on the board. And I think he talked to this board about the possibility of that would be on a planning for this year. And at that point, before I was on the board, I volunteered with Mr. Walsh. If they thought that my expertise would be of some service, I would be happy to do that, working with the HR department and others. So I think it's time that we got an appropriate group together to deal with an outdated employee manual, to bring it up to current standards, and to make sure that we're actually having as a manual what we want in it as far as expressing ourselves clearly and letting the employees know what's expected of them and what they can expect of their employer. So I would be happy to do this.
Thank you. Anyone else? Clerk Guthrie?
Since my name was put on the memo, I too will say something. I would be honored to do this. I do like policies and procedures, and I do love maintaining the record. And I think diving into the current policies that we have in place would help get those records up to date in regards to policies, would get us on the same page. And if there are any needed reviews, we can do that. And I think it will make for better governance for our residents in Meridian Township. So I would be honored to be on this committee.
Thank you, Clerk Guthrie. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll see this back in a couple of weeks. All right, that brings us to item 14, comments from the public. Our public has dwindled. Would anyone like to speak in front of the boards this evening?
Congrats on the rankings. Meridian Township.
Thank you very much. All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment at 8:58. Item 15 is other matters and board member comments. Anything left to talk about this evening? All right, seeing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by trustee Wilson, supported by treasurer DeShane. All those in favor of adjournment say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the meeting stands adjourned at 8:59 PM.